What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto family died, he lost everything and rose to rule broken world? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. War never changes. In the year of 2077, the deteriorating relationships and rising tensions between the three world superpowers, the United States, the People's Republic of China, and the Soviet Union reached a boiling point, and on October 23, nuclear warheads from every nuclear-powered country were launched, signaling the start of the Great War. It lasted only 2 hours, but the aftermath forever changed the face of the Earth. Entire mountain ranges were created as the ground buckled and moved under the strain of the cataclysmic pressure produced by numerous, concentrated atomic explosions. Rivers and oceans around the world were contaminated with the resulting radioactive fallout released by the low-yield nuclear weapons used by all sides, and the climate changed horrifically. All the regions of the Earth suffered from a single, permanent season once the initial dust blasted into the atmosphere by the nuclear explosions had settled, a scorching, radioactive desert summer. The only ones to survive were the American citizens that took refuge in massive underground bunkers known as vaults. When they emerged, they only had the harsh heat and radiation of the wastes to greet them. When they left the vaults, some separated and went their own way while others stayed near their vault to begin a new society. Before the war, New Jersey had been one of the biggest industrial states in the United States after World War II. Following the start of the resources wars in 2052, Newark, one of New Jersey's biggest industrial city, thrived under the increased military funding and need for guns, ammunition, planes, power armor, and nuclear warheads and missiles. A vault had been built under the city, Vault 25, by Vault Tech before the war. Funded by billionaire, Japanese factory owners, the vault was privately owned by Kohaku Namikaze, and the vault was filled with the best of America's scientists, doctors, and soldiers that weren't under government payroll. The vault was split into clans, much like feudal Japan. Each clan had a certain trait shared by all its inhabitants. There were a total of 9 clans in Vault 25. The Aburame clan were a scientific clan and were the top agricultural scientists and bug experts. They were responsible for finding ways of reintroducing plant life in a hostile environment, while also responsible for breeding bug species capable of surviving in the desolate wasteland outside the vault. Their children were trained to know the many different plant types and insects, but very few were taught to fight. The Akamichi clan were a warrior clan and were the demolition experts in Vault 25's army. They were tasked with designing new explosives for both military and non-military purposes. Their children were specially trained to use handheld explosives and explosive launchers. The Hyuga clan were a warrior clan that were taught a deadly hand-to-hand fighting style and were highly effective scouts in Vault 25's army. Their children, at a young age, were taught the art of war and battle and trained to be deadly with their fists, or even more deadly when given a power fist. The Inuzuka clan were a warrior clan that were skilled trackers and scavengers. They were also trained to fight with bladed weapons, and at a young age, the Inuzuka were trained in a deadly kenjutsu style that made them very deadly with a bladed weapon and trained attack dogs to fight alongside them. The Nara clan were a scientific clan that was tasked with researching and decoding pre-war technology and finding ways to rebuild and improving them, as well as their strategy skills. They were known for their high intelligence in science and their laziness for anything non-scientific. At a young age, their children had a high love for science and mathematics, but none for fighting. The Yamanaka clan were a warrior clan that trained effective spies and interrogators and renowned poison makers. They also trained psychologists that were invaluable to the mental health of Vault 25's residents. They were merciless with captured raiders and were trained in the art of interrogation from a young age. They preferred throwing or bladed weapons that were covered in their clan's deadly neurotoxic poison. The Senju clan were a medical clan that was tasked with training doctors and creating new drugs from plants that the Aburame clan grew. They were known for being the best doctors, but for also training fierce warriors. Their clan members usually used laser weapons as their preferred weapon. The Uchiha clan were a warrior clan that trained some of the best sharpshooters in Vault 25. Their clan members made up a majority of the sharpshooter unit in Vault 25's army. Their children were trained to sharpshoot from a young age and always preferred using scoped rifles or sniper rifles. Finally, the Namikaze clan was a warrior clan and the ruling clan of Vault 25. They were some of the most brilliant strategists and diplomats but also the fiercest warriors in Vault 25. Automatic weapons and long-distance rifles were their weapon of choice. The vault was ruled under an overseer, and since the vault had closed, the Namikaze clan had always stayed in power. During the reign of Minato Namikaze, 181 years after the Great War ended, the vault was opened, and in 12 years, Vault 25 had been turned into a thriving village. Their income came from nearby towns and settlements that paid for their protection and missions to kill bands of raiders and super mutants. Vault 25 had built a wall around the pre-war city of Newark, and using the Nara's intelligence and scientific know-how, Minato was able to restore the factories to working conditions, which let him mass-produce bullets and weapons. Vault 25's soldiers were known as shinobi, ninja, because they were trained in the art of stealth and assassination in addition to open battles. Jonin, elite warriors, wore pre-war, military-grade riot gear that had been lightened to promote mobility but still have a degree of protection. They also wore a pre-war riot helmet that had a rebreather attached to it for underwater breathing and filtered breathing. The armor was sealed so it provided protection from radiation and hazardous gases. The armor was reserved for only the Jonin, elite warriors, of the village that took the most dangerous missions. Chunin, experienced warriors, received military-grade combat armor while Genin, recruits, received leather armor. At the heart of Vault 25 was a supercomputer that held everything Vault 25 knew, from vertibird schematics to nuclear warhead blueprints. It was because of this information that Vault 25 was targeted and constantly attacked by raiders. What they didn't know was that a bigger threat was just over the horizon. March 5, 2270. 1300 hours. Ihagakure no Sato. Village hidden in the ashes, Academy. Naruto Namikaze, son of Minato Namikaze, sat bored as he watched his teacher Iruka give a history lesson on the Resource War of 2052. In Ihagakure, the academy trained children math, science, geography, and fighting for 4 years. At the end of 4 years they are either accepted into the army or assigned to other branches of the village, such as the technology department or the agricultural department. He looked around the room to see absolutely everyone was bored out of their minds. Kiba Inuzuka, heir to the Inuzuka clan, had his head down on the desk while his puppy Akamaru slept in his hood. Shikamaru Nara, heir of the Nara clan, could be heard quietly snoring as he slept. The lazy Nara wasn't awake for class unless it involved science or math. Sasuke Uchiha was eyeing his rifle on the table. He's probably wants to go to the shooting range, mused Naruto as he started falling asleep. Naruto, yelled Iruka, causing Naruto to jerk his head up and fall back in his chair. The entire class erupted in laughter while Naruto rubbed his ass. Iruka-sensei, what was that for? Complained Naruto. Pay attention, Naruto. This is vital to know. History teaches us to learn from our ancestors' mistakes. If you want to be a good leader, you need to know the history of the past, lectured Iruka. Naruto was cleaning his ear when Iruka was finished. Huh, you say something, Iruka-sensei? The whole class once again erupted into laughter, while Iruka turned red in anger. Suddenly Iruka's head tripled in size. Shut up, you little bastards. Once everyone was settled down, Iruka started his lesson again, to which Naruto and half the class fell asleep. This time Iruka let them sleep, learning his lesson. Once class was over, he dismissed his students and everyone left. Naruto walked out of the academy. It was a 2-story building that had been a pre-war high school. He started running down the street and waved hello to all the polite villagers. Children ran through the streets chasing dogs or mole rat pups. Women swept the porches of their shacks or pre-war houses which they lived in. Chunin patrolled the streets looking for troublemakers or suspicious people. He passed through the market and looked through the many stalls villagers and wasteland merchants sold their goods. He looked toward one stall and took an apple before rummaging in his pocket and tossing the vendor a copper coin, which the vendor took with a nod. As he ate the apple and walked through the market, a certain stall caught his attention. He approached and saw a dark-skinned man wearing leather armor and a hat to protect him from the wasteland sun, along with a Caucasian woman with combat armor carrying an assault rifle over her shoulder. He looked through their wares to find some leather, combat, and metal armors all in decent conditions. He also saw some assault rifles, shotguns, and pistols along with some modification kits. But what caught his attention was the 9mm pistol on the table. He picked it up to see it was in moderately good condition, and along with it, there were 3 modification kits with it: silencer, flashlight, and a laser sight. "See something you like, kid?" asked the merchant. TAC-45, semi-automatic, 9mm ammunition, released in 2066 when the food riots of pre-war America began in the major cities. Distributed to law enforcement for riot control because of the deadly damage at close range, spoke Naruto. "Where did you find it?" asked Naruto after he finished looked at the pistol. The merchant was surprised that a kid as young as 12 could know so much about a pre-war pistol until he remembered that the village was founded by vault dwellers. "It's a vault education." "You got a good eye, kid. I found it while I was scavenging through New York City. Managed to get my hands on it before some ghouls chased me out of the metro," explained the merchant. "If you want it, it's just 500 caps and 250 caps for each of those mod kits," offered the merchant. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the merchant. "I'll give you 400 for the gun and 175 for the kits," counter-offered Naruto. "Listen, kid, I'm not going to haggle with a brat. So either pay up or get lost," snarled the merchant. Naruto scowled before reaching into his pockets and throwing the merchant some gold coins. Said merchant looked at the strange money before his eyes widened. "Is this gold?" asked the merchant. Naruto smirked. "It's your first time here, huh?" "Yeah, it's real gold. It's what we use as currency since caps are way too noisy to carry around." Naruto opened the flashlight and laser sight mod kits and quickly attaching them to his new pistol. He opened his cloak and pulled out an old 10mm pistol from his holster and replaced it with the 9mm. He threw the old 10mm on the table. "Keep that old thing, I sure as hell won't need it." The merchant grinned. "Pleasure doing business with you." Naruto rolled his eyes and walked away toward the south of the wall. March 5, 2270. 1400 hours. Western perimeter of Ihagakure. Kakashi Hitaki watched through the 12x scope of his anti-material rifle for any signs of hostile forces or raiding parties to the west of the wall. Unfortunately, today was quiet and Kakashi was very much bored. That was until he pulled out his handy-dandy pornography. He opened his orange little book titled, "Make Out Paradise," and started his perverted giggling. He didn't even notice anyone until it was too late. "What's so funny, Kakashi? Slacking off on the job?" asked an authoritative voice. Kakashi didn't even take his eyes off his book as he started sweating bullets. "Oh god. Minato-sensei caught me. What the hell do I do?" "I'm waiting, Kakashi," asked the voice impatiently. Kakashi slowly lowered the book and had the decency to look ashamed. "Please forgive me, Minato-sensei," exclaimed Kakashi as he got down on his knees. All of a sudden laughter could be heard and caused Kakashi to look up to see his surrogate brother Naruto. Kakashi immediately stood up and punched Naruto down on his head. "Idiot. Do you have any idea how much you scared me?" exclaimed Kakashi angrily. Naruto rubbed his head while he snickered. "I got you good, Kakashi ni-san." Kakashi scoffed and turned away, but anyone could see the small smile behind his mask. "What are you doing here, Naruto? Don't you usually hang out with Shikamaru after school?" asked Kakashi as he looked back through his scope. "Nah, Shikamaru went home to sleep." "Lazy Nara," muttered Naruto. Kakashi chuckled before he looked through his scope to see a band of 12 raiders looking at the wall from over a hill. "Finally some entertainment," muttered Kakashi as he grabbed a magazine of .50 caliber bullets and loaded them into his anti-material rifle. He pulled the bolt back and chambered around. He noticed that Naruto looked excited and Kakashi decided to be a good brother. "Nay, Naruto," spoke Kakashi. Naruto turned to look at his brother. "What is it, ni-san? How would you like to shoot instead of me?" asked Kakashi. Naruto immediately lit up with excitement. "Really, ni-san?" Kakashi nodded and moved away from the rifle, letting Naruto take his place. Naruto calmed himself down and got his breathing normal before looking through the scope. "Alright, you can do this. We've done this hundreds of times at home," Naruto kept telling himself. He saw a group of 12 raiders, vipers judging from their cloths. 2 carried flamers, 2 carried missile launchers, 4 carried assault rifles, and the last 4 were carrying melee weapons. He held this breath as he took aim of the viper with a flamer. He pressed the trigger as he exhaled. There was a loud boom as the rifle kicked back, but the bipod helped keep the rifle steady. Kakashi was watching through his binoculars as the bullet pierced right through the Viper's head and caused the fuel tank to explode, killing an additional 3 raiders in the explosion. Naruto didn't stop there as he pulled the bolt back and chambered another bullet. This time the raiders were scrambling around and it was hard to get a good aim. But that didn't deter Naruto from trying. He aimed and fired. The bullet traveled through the air before finally hitting one of the raiders' missile launchers, causing it to explode and leave the raider as nothing but a stain in the street. Naruto quickly chambered another bullet before aiming at the fission cell of a pre-war car that some raiders were hiding behind. He fired and the car immediately exploded in a mushroom cloud of death, killing the 4 Vipers that hid behind it. Naruto quickly chambered another bullet and was about to shoot the retreating Vipers, but Kakashi stopped him. Ma Naruto, I love that you're excited to kill some raiders, but we still need to track them to their camp to wipe them out," exclaimed Kakashi with an eye smile. Naruto nodded with a smile. He was happy that he got to defend his village from some raider scum. That was Naruto's motivation in life, to protect his village and everyone important to him. Kakashi took a serious face as he pressed a transmitter in his armor. "Squad-san, 3. This is Sentry Tower Go, 5. We just come in contact with a band of Junin, 12, Vipers. We need a dog squad to find their base camp." "Hi Kakashi Taicho. Squad-san is en route to track down the Vipers," responded a voice on the radio. After waiting a few minutes, a squad of 4 Jonin arrived near Sentry Tower 5. Kakashi gave them a quick nod, which was returned, before they grappled down the wall. They were all dressed in full elite Jonin armor. 2 carried sniper rifles while the other 2 carried katanas on their backs and carried dogs down the wall. "Nay Kakashi Nissan, why are so many Jonin going after a weak band of raiders?" asked Naruto as he watched the Jonin rappel down the wall. Kakashi, who was reading his porn, looked at Naruto lazily, because the Vipers aren't your normal ragtag group of raiders. They are descendants from vault dwellers like us, but along the way they abandoned their vault to prey on the innocent people of the wastes who already had a tough time living. They are a lot more advanced than other raiders, and what's worse is that they use a neurotoxic poison like the Yamanaka clan. They are to be taken very seriously. Naruto. Vipers are probably the most dangerous of any raider in the East Coast, explained Kakashi. Naruto nodded in understanding as he looked through the scope and surveyed the outer city while Kakashi read his porn. All of a sudden, Naruto saw a vertibird flying through the sky in their direction. "Kakashi Nissan, there's a vertibird coming toward us," warned Naruto. Kakashi immediately put down his book and looked through his binoculars to see Naruto was right. "Naruto, it's time to go home," spoke Kakashi as he loaded armor-piercing rounds into his sniper rifle. "What? But I want to stay," whined the blonde-haired boy. "Now," snapped Kakashi, causing Naruto to take a step back in fear. "Hi," replied Naruto meekly as he ran down the street back to his home. Kakashi had a guilty look on his face as he watched Naruto retreat into the village. "I'm sorry Naruto, but this is serious," whispered Kakashi as he looked back through his scope to see 5 vertibirds heading their way. "Command, this is Sentry Tower Go. There are 5 vertibirds coming this way from the west," spoke Kakashi into his transmitter. "Sentry Tower Go, what is their allegiance?" "Over," replied Command. "It's the Brotherhood Command, the Brotherhood of Steel." March 5, 2270. 13:15 hours. Ihagakure Town Hall. Minato Namikaze stared at the monitor of his terminal, going over some reports from his spies in the neighboring settlements. Suddenly a Chunin burst through the door. "Minato-sama. The Midwestern chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel have been spotted coming from the west." Minato's eyes hardened as he stood up from his chair and put on his white cloak with red flames on the flap over his riot armor. He walked out of the room and slumped his scar H over his shoulder, put the entire village on Defcon 3 and recall every shinobi back to the village, ordered Minato. The Chunin nodded and ran to relay his leader's orders. Minato walked out town hall and headed toward the gates. His forces were ready to meet the unwelcome visitors. The vertibird landed in front of the gate. The ramp opened and 6 heavily armored paladins armed with laser and plasma rifles setting up a perimeter around the vertibird. Once everything was secure, a man in black-colored power armor stepped out along with a woman wearing blue robes and carrying a notebook. The man was obviously the leader since his armor was black with a gold Brotherhood insignia while his bodyguards had silver armor with a blue insignia. "Ah, Mr. Namikaze, it's so nice to see you again," spoke the leader with his helmet on. "James Barnaki, don't you think it would be more polite to take off your helmet?" Minato all but growled. He, of course Mr. Namikaze." The head paladin took off his helmet to reveal a Caucasian man in his late 40s with raven black hair. "I hope that you have thought about my offer?" asked James. "Why don't we talk about this inside?" spoke Minato. James nodded and followed after Minato toward the town hall. As Minato and James walked through the village, some villagers looked out their windows and doors to see what was stirring around the village while Jonin stood on the roofs, ready to shoot their guests if they tried anything hostile. Chunin patrolled the streets to make sure there weren't spies trying to sneak in while the village was occupied with the Brotherhood. Naruto was bored out of his mind as he went through his father's things in his office. "Stupid Kakashi. What the big deal about some vertibirds?" muttered Naruto as he went on his father's terminal. "Damn, it's locked," cursed Naruto until he got an idea. "Thank you Shikamaru," spoke Naruto with a smirk as he looked at his Pip-Boy 3000 and activated the wireless hacking program. Robco Industries, TM, Termlink Protocol. Warning, lockout imminent. Warning, terminal security compromised. Decryption program 50% complete. 5947GY8930HFRHGH9. $% VY %% GT $H$W, Y and %# $T$Y and ##J$G $FDWDFQ$Y $U and H. G dollar. G dollar G % H U %, and JWG #G %B $M. B sharp. BL $BTH % YN $B. E EWBLEG. LE B. Begeltwood. Decryption program complete. Robco Industries Unified Operating System. Copyright 2075-2077 Robco Industries. SERVER1. Warning. Property of Vault 25 Overseer. Connection to Chitin 001 secure. Open safe. Activate Vault 25 door. Initiate Vault self-destruct sequence. Initiate protocol, Awari. Naruto was interrupted from his antics when the door suddenly opened. "Naruto. What are you doing here?" exclaimed Minato. Said Blonde looked past the computer to see his father flanked by 2 Anbu and 3 people wearing strange cloths. 2 wore bulky power armor and the final wore a scribe robe. "Who is this boy, Mr. Namikaze?" asked James. Minato rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is my son, Naruto. Who should be at home?" Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Hey, sorry, I got bored at home." "Sigma, take him home," one of the Anbu, wearing elite riot armor, gave a quick hi and led Naruto out of the room. Okay, I'm going. Nice meeting you, Ji-san," yelled Naruto before racing away, prompting the Anbu to run after him, making sure he got home safe. "Ji-san?" questioned James. "If I am correct, it translates to old man in pre-war Japanese." "Sir," spoke the female scribe for the first time. An amused smile came across the head paladin's face. "Thank you, Scribe Betty." He turned his attention back to Minato. "You've got a good kid there. I assume you also have a wife?" asked James as he and Minato took a seat at the desk. "She's dead," replied Minato coldly. "She died giving birth to my son," added Minato. "I'm so sorry for your loss," spoke James. "It's so hard to find love in this world we live in. There are dangers around every corner and we are faced with death every day. That is why the Brotherhood of Steel is trying their hardest to unite this country back to the way it was before the bombs fell. Unfortunately, we are only few with limited technology, but your vault was given an incredible gift. The knowledge to rebuild pre-war factories, farms, power plants, water purification plants, and weapons, nuclear warheads, and pre-war vehicles," interrupted Minato. "Please don't take me for a fool, James. You are no different than the pre-war government whose higher-ups wanted nothing more than to line their own pockets. I know that everything you talk about is a lie. You don't want to unite the wasteland. You want to control it, and your superiors only want to live their lives of luxury without interruption. My spies have already reported some of the corruption your Brotherhood show. You provide protection to the villages that can provide the most food and water while the other smaller settlements are left to fend for themselves. You council members are constantly accepting bribes from chem merchants who sell jet, psycho, rocket, and slasher throughout the Midwest while you look the other way. Here addictive chems are banned and not allowed anywhere inside the village, and any merchant caught trying to sneak in addictive chems are executed. And while it's true that we also only provide protection for the highest bidder, but we don't announce ourselves as models of justice, morality, and unity to the world when the truth is far from that," continued Minato. "So James, I have thought about your offer and I refuse," finished Minato. A look of annoyance etched itself on the Brotherhood Paladin's face. "Surely you want to rethink, Mr. Namikaze. While the Brotherhood is small, we are much bigger than your army," spoke James in a warning tone. Minato slammed his hand on the desk, causing some spider cracks to form and their respective bodyguards to point their weapons. "Is that a threat, you Brotherhood scum?" spoke Minato in a venomous tone. James stood up. "It's obvious that you won't consider our alliance offering. But a word of warning, Mr. Namikaze. This wasteland is unforgiving and one cannot hope to survive without allies," warned James before he walked out of the room. Minato and his guard followed after them to make sure they left the village. James and his party met once again with their escort at their Verde Bird. James and his entourage entered the Verde Bird while Minato watched them leave. "Minato-sama, what are your orders?" asked Shikaku Nara, Minato's military advisor. "Put the village at Defcon 2 and have the elite Jonin patrolling the walls 24/7, ordered Minato. Shikaku nodded and left to complete his orders. March 5, 2270. 1600 hours. Jersey Deadlands. Verde Bird Alpha. James Barnacki sighed exasperatedly as he sat in his chair while the Verde Bird flew south toward McGuire Air Force Base. "How did it go?" asked a voice in the darkened corner. "He refused with hostility. Had you not threatened his son, he might have been more cooperative," spoke James. "That mongrel should have known his place and handed over what I wanted in the first place. Now we will have to take it by force," spoke the voice. "Are you sure about this, Elijah?" The figure moved out of the shadows to reveal in his early 40s with whitening hair and small wrinkles. "If we go through with this attack, we'll lose a lot of men. The Midwestern and Mojave chapters are stretched out to their limit as they are. Not to mention what would happen if the Enclave finds out and comes to finish us off in our weakened state," reasoned James. Elijah waved him off. "Nonsense, the rewards outweigh the risks. Think about what we can do with that technology, James. We could rebuild pre-war factories, mass-produce energy weapons and robots, grow unirradiated food, and bring the wasteland back to its pre-war glory with the Brotherhood at the top." James let out a small sigh. "I know, but is it really worth destroying a thriving town in the wasteland?" questioned the blonde paladin. "One cannot hope to achieve change without making a few sacrifices," spoke Elijah. James just let out another sigh and accepted what they were going to do. "ETA 5 minutes to landing, Commander Barnacki," said the Verde Bird pilot. James nodded, and after 5 minutes the Verde Bird touched down in McGuire Air Force Base. The ramp opened to the scene of a fleet of over 30 Verde Birds sporting the insignia of the Mojave or Midwestern chapter of the Brotherhood. Paladins and knights of both factions hurried through the base carrying crates of energy weapons and ammunition for the upcoming battle. "Commander Barnacki, sir, what are your orders? Do we prepare for an offensive or an annexation?" asked a paladin carrying a Gauss rifle. "Prepare our forces for an attack at dawn, Captain," ordered James. The Brotherhood captain nodded and left to relay his commander's orders. James and Elijah walked into the command hangar to come face to face with the Viper leader, Johnny F., and his protection detail. "About damn time you got back," exclaimed Johnny as he put down his vodka. James and Elijah frowned but moved on. "We weren't able to get them to surrender peacefully. Make sure your men attack at dawn tomorrow." Johnny smirked and pulled out a cigarette. "Yeah, don't worry, we'll make sure to kill every single one of those assholes. As long as you hold up your end of the bargain," spoke Johnny as he lit his cigarette and held his hand out expectantly. James motioned for the nearest paladin to approach. Said paladin nodded and walked over with a large crate over his shoulder. The paladin dropped the crate in front of Johnny, who in turn opened the crate and started let out an impressed whistle. "Come to Papa," said Johnny as he pulled a laser RCW from the weapons crate and examined it. Suddenly he pointed it at Elijah. prompting the surrounding Brotherhood members to point their guns at him. Johnny gave an arrogant smirk before lowering his gun. "Everything seems to be cool, so I'll bounce and tell my boys to get ready to kill," spoke Johnny before leaving. "What exactly did you promise him?" asked Elijah. "I gave him a couple crates of laser RCWs and some mini-nuke launchers. Once we get rid of Namikaze and his forces, we'll kill those damn Vipers once and for all," spoke James before retiring to his quarters for the night. Elijah watched James leave before he looked out of the hangar toward his forces. Paladins and Knights donned their power armor and recon armor, gave their energy weapon one last inspection before slumping them over their back. Mechanics repaired and inspected vertibirds to make sure they ran smoothly. Soon the Brotherhood will be at the most powerful force in existence. First Vault 25, then the world, raved Elijah in his mind before leaving to go to his room. March 6, 2270. 0630 hours, dawn. Ihagakure West Wall. The sun rose over the horizon as Jonan surveyed the walls through their sniper scopes. Genma chewed on a toothpick as he looked through some binoculars to see a random raider walking toward the village. At first he thought it nothing, but when he looked his much more powerful scope, he could see it was more than one but rather over 100. He immediately reported it to command and the entire village was put under Defcon 1. Jonan raced to the west wall to reinforce the village gates. They closed the metal doors of the gates, and Chunin stood near the gates ready to engage the raiders with assault rifles, shotguns, and melee weapons. All of a sudden the Vipers and all other raiders, who joined the Vipers under temporary alliance, gave a war cry and charged the village. Automatic weapons and sniper rifles went off as Jonan mowed down the raiders from the top of the walls. The raiders, equipped with laser weapons and explosives, returned fire, taking the Jonan by surprise when some of their comrades went down from laser weapon holes. Johnny D laughed maniacally as he fired his laser RCW into the wall. "Yo Big Jim, let em have it," yelled Johnny to a bulky, dark-skinned raider holding a Fat Man mini nuke launcher. Said raider gave a grunt and aimed the hulking nuke launcher. It did not go unnoticed by the Jonan on the wall. "Shit, get away from the gates," exclaimed Genma toward the Chunin. Unfortunately he was too late and a nuclear explosion ripped the gate from its hinges, causing the massive doors to kill anyone that stood too close. The raiders stormed the village, taking the evacuating villagers by surprise. All the remaining Chunin and Jonan ran back into the village to engage the invading raiders. From Town Hall, Minato watched the chaos that ensued in his village. "How is this possible?" spoke Minato with grit teeth. Suddenly it became clear when the familiar sound of a verti-bird engine sounded from the east. The village leader turned to see a fleet of 30 verti-birds land in the east of the village, directly behind the vault entrance. Brotherhood paladins and knights stormed from their vehicles and blew a massive hole in the wall to engulf the village in steel. Villagers screamed in terror as they were slaughtered by approaching raiders, and Genin, Chunin, and Jonan struggled to keep the invaders from coming any closer into their home. Minato clenched his fists until they bled. "Damn it. This is my fault. If only I'd given in to their demands, then this would never have happened," thought Minato remorsefully as he let some tears shed. "No, I won't let our people die," exclaimed Minato as he logged onto his terminal. Robco Industries Unified Operating System. Copyright 2075-2077 Robco Industries. SERVER1. Warning. Property of Vault 25 Overseer. Connection to Chitin 001 secure. Open safe. Activate Vault 25 door. Initiate Vault self-destruct sequence. Initiate protocol, Awari. Minato selected to connect to Vault 25's main interface. Robco Industries Unified Operating System. Copyright 2075-2077 Robco Industries. Server Chitin 001. Warning. Restricted access only. Purge all data. Transfer all data to Pip-Boy 4KA. Initiate self-destruct sequence. Minato transferred all data to his Pip-Boy before selecting to purge all data from the mainframe to prevent the Brotherhood from ever getting their hands on it. Minato looked at his Pip-Boy to make sure all the data was safely transferred. Once that was done, he called Kakashi and assigned an Anbu to fetch Naruto to see him. "You called for me, sensei?" asked Kakashi as he caught his breath. He was covered in blood and his combat knife was still dripping from cutting open a countless number of raiders while Naruto had a look of absolute terror on his face and he looked at his father with pleading eyes. Minato walked up to his son and wrapped him in a hug, effectively calming him down. Kakashi, what I'm going to ask you to do is going to be the hardest thing I have ever told someone. Kakashi could see that his sensei had a pained look on his face as he hugged his son. I want you to take Naruto and go, spoke Minato, causing Naruto and Kakashi to tense. You can't be serious, sensei. We can't just abandon you. No. Two-san, I don't want to leave you, cried Kakashi and Naruto respectively. I'm sorry, but the village is lost. The raiders are slaughtering us, and even if we did kill them all, the Brotherhood would just finish the rest of us off in our tired state. Please grant me this wish, Kakashi. Take Naruto and leave while you still have a chance, pleaded Minato to his former student. Kakashi looked at his teacher and leader and reluctantly nodded. Naruto on the other hand was shedding tears as he heard what his father had said. The village that he was born in, had grown up in, and had dreamed of having a family in was doomed to be destroyed by scum of the wasteland and technology-obsessed lunatics. Naruto shook his head and refused to let go of his father. No. I won't leave. If you die, then I'll die with you, proclaimed Naruto as he latched onto his father tighter. Minato smiled sadly down on his son. I can't let you do that, Naruto. Your mother would never forgive me if I let you die. You still have your life ahead of you. Who am I to take that from you? He used his strength to move Naruto off him, put him down and looked at his son who had his face overshadowed while tears rolled down his face. But that doesn't mean you'll forget us. Minato removed Naruto's and his own Pip-Boy, switching devices. This Pip-Boy was the pinnacle of pre-war technology and has been handed down from overseer to overseer and from father to son for generations. As overseers, we were tasked with always keeping our vault safe as well as our heritage and culture alive and remembering our roots, but I failed. Minato adjusted the new Pip-Boy on Naruto's arm. The device seemed to sink needles into his arm, but Naruto felt nothing as he listened to the last words his father ever told him. I opened the vault and announced to the world our technology causing this to befall us. Minato looked down at his son with pride. But I know that you will do a better job than me. You will reunite this world and succeed in what I failed because you are my son, and no matter what happens, I will always be proud of you. Naruto wiped the tears from his eyes and gave his father a smile. I promise Two-san that I rebuild our village and make you proud, proclaimed Naruto. Minato rubbed the top of his head affectionately. I have no doubt about that, Naruto. Now go. Naruto nodded and started leaving with Kakashi. Kakashi, thank you, spoke Minato. Kakashi gave his former sensei a sad smile. For what it's worth, it was an honor to serve you, spoke Kakashi before leaving. Minato sighed sadly as he returned to his desk, ignoring the occasional explosion and constant sound of gunfire. Robco Industries Unified Operating System. Copyright 2075-2077 Robco Industries. SERVER1. Warning. Property of Vault 25 Overseer. Connection to Chitin 001 secure. Open safe. Activate Vault 25 door. Initiate Vault self-destruct sequence. Initiate protocol, Awari. He once again logged on and activated protocol the Vault 25 self-destruct sequence and initiated protocol, Awari, to take place in 10 minutes. Protocol Awari was a protocol that would activate small nuclear devices inside every factory, detonating them and destroying every fully functioning pre-war factory to prevent the enemy from using them should the village ever be captured. Robco Industries Unified Operating System. Copyright 2075-2077 Robco Industries. SERVER1. Warning. Self-destruct sequence activated. Core meltdown in progress. T10 minutes to nuclear meltdown. Shikaku, are you going to come out now? Asked Minato wholeheartedly. Said military advisor stepped out of the shadows with a blank look. I never thought we would ever use that, spoke Shikaku. Minato chuckled. My father always told me to be prepared for anything. I'll assume you told your wife the reality of the situation? Questioned Minato. Shukaku nodded. I told her and the other clan heads. Minato to give a sad smile. Good. I prefer as many people as possible survive this day, but if we announce this to the village, the men will lose their morale and give up fighting, letting the Brotherhood or worse the Vipers slaughter the ones trying to escape. Minato stood up from his chair and put on his signature cloak and loaded his Scar H with a clip before throwing Shikaku a Desert Eagle pistol. Shikaku let a chuckle escape his lips. "Never did I think I would use a gun," spoke the Nara as he examined the pistol. "Well, I thought us old men could go out in a blaze of glory instead of dying here, hiding like cowards," spoke Minato with a smirk. Shikaku nodded as he chambered a bullet. "After you, Minato-sama," spoke Shikaku in his exaggerated tone. Minato smirked at his advisor before kicking open the door and going out to engage the enemy with his troops, his conscience clear and his affairs in order. March 6, 2270. 0700 hours. Vault 25. Elijah pulled the trigger on his Gauss rifle, killing the Nara that had been working down in the mainframe room. He was flanked by James Barnacki. Behind them marched 6 Paladin escorts. After walking down 5 levels, they had finally reached the mainframe room. A large computer hooked up to countless processors and wires that ran throughout the room. "Isn't it beautiful?" whispered Elijah as he made his way toward the console. "Set up a perimeter," ordered James. His paladins nodded and left to complete their orders. "How long until you hack into the system?" asked James impatiently. He had a bad feeling and wanted to get out as soon as possible. "It shouldn't be more than 10 minutes to create an external hard drive with all the data downloaded onto it," replied Elijah as he focused on his work. Suddenly a red alert sounded throughout the vault. "What?" "The data is being transferred to an external source." Elijah aggressively tried to stop the program, but the overseer's terminal had priority over the one Elijah had commandeered. "No. He's purging the data. That son of a bitch. All that technology, gone," cried Elijah in anger as the mainframe erased all its data. "Warning, Vault self-destruct program activated. Please exit the vault in an orderly fashion and thank you for choosing Vault Tech as your preferred post-apocalyptic survival bunker." James and Elijah were shocked that Minato would destroy the vault then let them capture it. Immediately Elijah acted as he raced out of the room, pushing James out of the way as he tried to escape the vault. "All forces, this is General Barnacki. Initiate Phase 2 and place the village on lockdown. Do not let anyone escape," ordered James on his BOS transmitter. He motioned for his paladins to follow him and they quickly ran after their leader to escape the vault. March 6, 2270. 0715 hours. Ihagakure North Wall. Kakashi and Naruto ran through the village, ducking into alleys and behind trash cans when Vipers or BOS Knights passed by them on their way to the front lines. Finally they reached the north wall. They climbed to the nearest sentry point and Kakashi reached into his cloak and prepared to rappel down the rope. Naruto looked toward the village to see the fighting had been centralized to Town Hall while some pockets of resistance still existed. He took out a pair of binoculars from his duffel bag and scanned the town. What he saw shocked him. The Brotherhood had turned against the Vipers and started killing them. The raiders were taken by surprise and were being slaughtered by the traitorous Brotherhood forces. After most of the raiders were dead or fleeing, the Knights and Paladins began moving to crush all points of resistance and closed in on the town hall where a majority of Ihagakure's defenders were located. "Hey, stop right there," yelled a Paladin that had spotted Kakashi and Naruto. Naruto froze as the Paladin raised his plasma rifle. Naruto closed his eyes and waited for death, but instead of the sound of an energy weapon, the boom of a rifle sounded. The blonde opened his eyes to see the Paladin on the ground with a hole in his helmet. Blood rushed from the Paladin's helmet. Naruto had never witnessed a kill from up close. His kills always happened from the other side of a scope. He was knocked out of his stupor when Kakashi grabbed him from behind and led him away. "We don't have time for sightseeing, Naruto. We need to go now," exclaimed Kakashi as he attached the harness to Naruto's cloths. Naruto nodded and, like all the time he had trained to do, he rappelled down the north wall. Naruto landed on the other side of the wall and looked around his surroundings while Kakashi joined him. "Where are we going, Kakashi-Nisan?" asked Naruto. Kakashi looked at his Pip-Boy for a minute before answering. "There's a secret Jonin hideout in the north, we can go." Kakashi was interrupted when he jumped out of the way of multiple laser beams fired down on them. The duo looked up to see a squad of Brotherhood paladins firing down on them. "Run, Naruto!" exclaimed Kakashi as he aimed his assault rifle and fired on the BOS paladins, pinning them down and giving Naruto time to run deeper into the outer pre-war city. The paladins jumped down the wall and took a minute to adjust to the shock experienced from the jump before pursuing the shinobi into pre-war Newark. Kakashi vs. BOS paladins. Kakashi hid behind a stone wall as the BOS paladins fired on his position. He strapped his assault rifle on his back. "Now I can show you why shinobi are feared," Kakashi whispered as he activated his suit's camouflage system, disappearing from view. "Find those bastards. Commander Barnaki doesn't want any escapees," ordered the squad captain. Kakashi drew his ripper and snuck up behind one of the paladin. The Brotherhood soldiers combed the streets as they searched for their targets. Kakashi raised his ripper and slammed it into the paladin's power armor engine. "Shit!" exclaimed the paladin as he tried to get the ripper from his armor engine. Kakashi quickly snuck away while his fellow paladins rushed to help only to be too late. "Adams!" yelled the captain. Adams screamed in fear as the engine reached meltdown point and exploded in a miniature mushroom cloud. The force pushed the other 3 paladins on their backs. Kakashi grabbed a grenade from his belt and pulled the pin, throwing it in the center of the 3 paladins. "Grenade!" cried one of the paladins. The remaining squad quickly turned their back on the grenade to protect themselves from the blast. Boom! Kakashi aimed his rifle from a nearby roof. The squad had failed to notice the smoking pre-war car. The car, already weakened by the grenade blast, only needed one more push before it reached its meltdown point. The Jonin aimed and pulled the trigger. The car exploded in a large mushroom cloud, pushing the Brotherhood soldiers into buildings, ripping limbs off, and dosing them with an unhealthy amount of radiation. Kakashi jumped off the building with his rifle pointed ahead of him. He neared the closest Brotherhood paladin and kicked him. The soldier didn't move and Kakashi moved away to find the other 2. "Campbell, come on man. Don't you die on me," cried Captain Johnson as he tried to desperately wake up his last surviving squad member. Kakashi quietly stalked up behind him and pulled the combat knife from his chest armor. Look out," muttered Campbell as he pointed behind Johnson. The Brotherhood captain acted quickly and grabbed Kakashi's arm. Kakashi and Johnson struggled to overpower the other. "You son of a bitch. I'll kill you," cried Johnson, his power armor overpowering Kakashi. Kakashi kicked Johnson in the chest, sending him stumbling back. The Jonin quickly swung his assault rifle and fired on Johnson. The armor-piercing bullets tore through his armor like paper and Johnson fell to the floor dead. Kakashi lowered his gun and breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't notice Campbell until it was too late. "Die US scum," cried out Campbell before firing his laser pistol. The energy beam hit Kakashi in the abdomen. The silver-haired Jonin cried in pain and fell to the ground before quickly pulling his 10mm pistol and putting a bullet through Campbell's forehead. Kakashi slowly picked himself up while hissing in pain. He reached into the cloak only to find he had run out of stimpack. "Damn it," hissed Kakashi in pain before injecting himself with some Med-X. The Jonin gave a sigh of relief and wrapped the wound before he began walking toward the Jonin hideout he had sent Naruto to. Never did the Jonin know that the laser beam had cut open a major blood vessel. He wouldn't survive beyond the next day. Naruto quietly snuck through the pre-war streets of Nutley, NJ, hiding in the alleys and behind cars whenever he heard a noise. While his father's forces had instilled fear in the many gangs of vandals and the number of raiders in the Garden State, the attack on his home meant that chaos was going to resume in the surrounding area without his village thinning the numbers of raiders and providing protection for the thriving post-war towns. He crouched immediately when a squad of vipers patrolled the street. He ducked behind some trash cans and waited for them to pass. But he immediately froze when he saw a dog was patrolling with them. The dog would be able to sniff him out in a heartbeat. "Damn, I wish we could have gone to raid those ninja bastards," exclaimed one of the vipers. "Stop bitchin', at least we don't gotta worry about them ninja bastards stopping us from raiding those towns no more," replied his viper companion. "Rough, what is it now, you mutt?" asked another viper irritant. Naruto scowled knowing his cover was blown. He reached into his cloak and pulled a flash grenade from his cloak. "Rough, rough, rough, rough," snarled the dog, pulling against the leash to try and sink his teeth into the intruder. "Go get it, you mutt," cried out the raider as he dropped leash. Suddenly a grenade clinked into view below the rabid dog. "Shit!" yelled the raiders as the explosive exploded in a bright flash of light, blinding them. Naruto used their confusion and began running toward the irradiated waters of the Passaic River, the rabid Doberman hot on his heels. As Naruto reached the shore of the river, he was tackled from behind. Naruto quickly fell on his back and grabbed the dog's mouth before it could sink its teeth into him. Naruto struggled as he held the dog with his right arm and reached for his combat knife with his left hand. "Get off me, you damn son of a bitch!" yelled Naruto as he gripped his knife and sank the blade into the dog's neck. The dog yelped in pain as it was thrown to the right and Naruto quickly stood to his feet. He slowly approached the dog as it lay bleeding on the floor with a knife in its neck. He couldn't help but feel bad for the poor dog. He pulled out his 9mm and slowly raised the pistol to the dog's head. The dog, accepting his fate, closed its eyes as it waited for death. The blonde pulled the trigger and put the poor animal out of its misery. He pulled the knife from dog's neck and cleaned it before returning it to its sheath. He just stood there, looking at the unmoving form of the dog, trying to justify what he had done. He had been raised around guns and death, and in his village all 12-year-olds were drafted into the military. But only psychopaths could shrug off a kill without any remorse. He looked at his cloths to see they were covered in blood. This was why he preferred sniper rifles. It was always easier when you could kill someone from long distances and never get their blood on your cloths. He was knocked out of his thoughts when he heard the Vipers closing in on his position. "This way, I heard a gunshot," yelled one of the Vipers. Naruto looked around to see he was surrounded and the only way to escape was through the water. He grabbed his duffel bag and dug into his pocket to pull out a bottle of Rad X. He popped the lid and swallowed a few pills before jumping into the irradiated water of the Passaic River. His Pip-Boy's Geiger counter was clicking rapidly as Naruto held his head above the water. "Damn it! Someone killed the mutt, Violet won't be happy," yelled the Viper in anger. "Bah! Who cares if the mutt died? Let's just get out of here," replied another Viper. Naruto gave a sigh until he heard what the raider said next. "Come on, let's get out of here before the spider crabs come out of the water." "Spider crabs?" thought Naruto fearfully as realization came in. True to God. Naruto had to bite his tongue to keep from yelling in surprise and fear when something brushed by his leg. "Crap, how the hell could I forget about the spider crab?" ranted Naruto mentally. "Okay, Naruto. Stay calm. What did Iruka-sensei say to do if you're being targeted by spider crabs?" "Spider crabs are attracted to vibrations in the water." Naruto reached into his cloak and pulled a grenade above water. He pulled the pin and threw it as far as possible. There was a large explosion and Naruto could feel that whatever had been surrounding him had abandoned him and rushed toward the explosion point. Naruto took the chance and went back onto the shore. He looked around to see he was alone. He brought up his Pip-Boy and saw he was close to the Jonin hideout. Naruto once again began sneaking through the streets of Nutley until he reached his destination. An abandoned army bunker. He stood in front of the door and waited for it to open. A panel seemed to appear from the wall as it scanned him with a red light. The red light scanned his once before concentrating on his Pip-Boy and opening the electromagnetic lock, and the door opened vertically. The blonde went inside the bunker and let out a sigh of relief as he sat on a nearby couch. Suddenly a large explosion rocked the bunker for a few seconds before calming down. The security robots were sent into frenzy as they moved throughout the living area of the bunker, ignoring everything as pre-war protocols were initiated. "What's happening?" asked Naruto toward a nearby Mr. Gutsy. The robot stopped in its tracks and looked at Naruto before answering, "Sir. A nearby nuclear-scale explosion has been detected. Protocol X-58R has been initiated," replied the robot before returning to duty. Naruto couldn't help but feel a pit form in his stomach as he had a very good clue what was happening. As he laid on the couch, he couldn't help but feel his eyes began to feeling heavy as the physical and emotional strain of the day finally caught up to him. Naruto closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep, never expecting the challenges that the following day would bring. March 6, 2270. 1400 hours. Ihagakure, Jersey Deadlands. The once prosperous town and military village of Ihagakure was now completely destroyed, indistinguishable from the wasteland left from the Great War less than 200 years ago. Houses and shacks destroyed. Radiation flooded the town from the nuclear meltdown of Vault 25's nuclear reactor, and the Brotherhood and defenders of the once great village still fought. The Jonin and Paladins continued their exchange of bullets and energy beams, Chunin and Genin dead from the ineffectiveness of their armor against radiation, and Brotherhood Knights killed by radiation poisoning that their recon armor couldn't protect against. But the Paladins and Jonin could still fight in the completely radioactive ruins as their sealed suits protected them from the radiation. Unfortunately, Konoha's defenders would not win. They were tired and running out of ammunition as the Brotherhood picked them off. There were no more than 25 Jonin left, as well as their leader, damn it, cursed Minato, dressed in his full Jonin armor, as he threw his empty Scar H on the floor and drew his pistol. "Minato-sama, what do we do?" asked one of his Jonin desperately. "We're surrounded and outnumbered." "I know, and I'm sorry, but there is nothing we can do." All the Jonin seemed to look down dejectedly. "But does that mean we will give up?" "No. These walking tin cans invaded and destroyed our village. The village that took 12 years of blood and tears to build. Are we going to let them get away with this? Are we going to die like dogs on a street? No, we are going to die, but we are going to die after taking as many of them down with us." All the Jonin morale seemed to fill up completely as they roared in agreement. Minato drew his Ripper and held his Desert Eagle in the other hand. "We will die here, but our legacies will be remembered through history." All the Jonin roared in agreement and joined their leader as he jumped from out of cover and charged the Brotherhood line. On the Brotherhood line, Senior Paladin Wright watched as the final surviving soldiers of the former ninja village charged at them. Before the vault had exploded in a nuclear explosion, Commander Barnaki had given Wright the final orders of wiping out the Vipers and Ihagakure defenders before retreating back to their main base in the Midwest and putting the bunker in lockdown. With his final orders made, he met his demise in the fiery aftermath of the nuclear meltdown. "Fire!" commanded Wright. His men obeyed and unleashed a volley of laser and plasma beams, taking some of them down. But 20 still survived and clashed with them. Minato ripped his Ripper through a paladin's throat before putting a bullet through another's head. The highly experienced Jonin decimated the least experienced paladins, while the experienced paladins had trouble fighting the Jonin. After an hour of fighting, Minato laid on the ground, broken and bleeding from the stomach. His organs rearranged after being hit with Paladin Wright's super sledge, and all the weapons stored kinetic energy, destroying his body. It was a miracle he was still alive, but it wouldn't last. Out of the 200 Brotherhood soldiers that attacked in the beginning, only 20 survived and a majority of the leadership was killed. Commander Barnaki was Kia and Elder Elijah was Mia. Wright stood over him with his Gauss rifle pointed at his head. "So many lives lost, and for what?" "Nothing," yelled the senior paladin in anger. "Any last words or regrets?" Minato reached up and removed his helmet. The blonde looked at Wright in the eye. "The only regret I have is not taking more of why you bastards w with me," spoke Minato weakly before giving a triumphant smile. Wright growled in anger and pulled the trigger. "Order any remaining forces to meet up at the Verdi Birds. We're leaving this damn place once and for all," ordered Wright. "Yes, sir," was chorused by his few remaining paladins as they left to complete their orders. The Midwestern chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel suffered a great defeat that would take years to recover from, and even then they will never reach the same level of power before this day. March 7, 2270. 0200 hours. Iowa Wasteland. Black Zone. Elder Elijah of the Mojave chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel sat in his Verdi Bird as it flew over the wasteland of Iowa back towards the deserts of the Mojave. An IV pack of Radaway was slowly being injected into his bloodstream to cure the advanced radiation poisoning he had gotten from being exposed to the residual radiation for too long. "All my plans, ruined," cursed Elijah weakly. "I was so close. If only that savage had given me what I wanted. I could have led the Brotherhood to the top. Now I am returning with nothing to show except a single Verdi Bird and pilot. McNamara will probably try to have me overthrown, but I won't let that happen," spoke Elijah angrily. "After I deal with the NCR and activate Archimedes I from Helios 1, I can finally devote our remaining resources to finding something that can lead the Brotherhood to the top." Elijah continued his convoluted plots and fantasies, never taking into account the severity of his crimes in his mad dash for power. He would never see the final crime that delivers him to the hands of someone he would have considered a ghost, and he is executed for his crimes. March 7, 2270. 0600 hours. Army Bunker X-34. Nutley, Jersey Deadlands. Naruto's eyes snapped open as the blast door of the bunker creaked open. Naruto stood up and went to meet whoever had entered the bunker. He looked at the doorway and saw it was his surrogate older brother, Kakashi, and he was extremely pale. "Ni-san!" exclaimed Naruto in concern, "what's wrong with you?" Kakashi slumped against the wall as he held his side. The sharpshooter gave Naruto a sad smile behind his mask. "Sorry I'm late, I had to help a Brahmin cross the street." Naruto ignored the horrible excuse and crouched at his side, looking for injuries. He finally found it when he saw he was bleeding from the abdomen and the bleeding was not stopping. "Ni-san, we need to get you into the auto dock," exclaimed Naruto as he tried to help Kakashi onto his feet, only for Kakashi himself to stop him. "Wait, Naruto," spoke Kakashi weakly. "What do you mean wait?" questioned Naruto. "I'm not going to survive, Naruto. I lost too much blood and we don't share the same blood type." Kakashi shifted himself into a more comfortable position. "This is my fault. I was careless and let that paladin hit me with his laser pistol. Now I'm going to die." Tears began falling from Naruto's eyes. He had lost his father and home and now he was going to lose the only person he considered a brother. "Can you do me a favor, Naruto?" Naruto nodded furiously. "Make them pay, Naruto. Make the Brotherhood pay for what they did to us and our home," spoke Kakashi weakly. "Hi Ni-san, I swear on my life I will annihilate the Brotherhood," proclaimed Naruto. Kakashi smiled and gave him a pat on the head before taking his last breath and leaving the world of the living. "Ni-san, wake up." Naruto shook Kakashi violently. "This isn't funny. Wake up." Naruto shook even harder. When it became obvious that his older brother wouldn't open his eyes, something in Naruto snapped. He didn't cry, he didn't sniffle, didn't even have a facial expression. It was the expression of a man who had lost everything, except it was on the face of a child. An hour later, Naruto stood over the grave of his older brother, having buried him at the outside of the bunker. He went back inside and looked over his older brother's belongings, having taken them off before burying him. A standard Pip-Boy 3000, a damaged suit of elite riot armor, a .50 caliber anti-material rifle, a .357 Magnum Desert Eagle, an M16A4 assault rifle, and a Vault-issue combat knife. Naruto brought up his Pip-Boy. He had found out that his Pip-Boy was in reality the most advanced in its time. It had the processing power of 2 supercomputers and could remotely hack into a security system in a few seconds. It was with his Pip-Boy 4Ka that his father was able to take control of the army bunker's mainframe. His Pip-Boy was also able to wirelessly hack into any terminal he came across and had countless terabytes of pre-war blueprints and data on it. His Pip-Boy could also use the abandoned pre-war satellites in the atmosphere to send messages to other Pip-Boys and terminals. He pressed a few buttons on his Pip-Boy. A small maintenance hatch opened and released a maintenance Eyebot. "Repair this armor and these weapons," ordered Naruto. The Eyebot scanned the items on the table and gave a negatory beep. Naruto went back on his Pip-Boy and uploaded the weapon and armor schematics to the Eyebot. The machine paused a minute before giving a positive beep before encasing the items on the table in a blue light where it then levitated the items to the maintenance bay to repair them. With that done, Naruto walked toward the armory of the bunker. He walked 3 floors deeper and came across a 5 steel-inch blast door. He brought up his Pip-Boy which hacked the terminal and caused the hydraulic motors to open the door. The blonde walked into the armory. All the equipment here was fully repaired by maintenance Eyebots, so he didn't have to worry about poorly maintained equipment. He looked through the equipment and chose a suit of elite riot armor. He looked through the weapons and grabbed an AK-47 assault rifle, adding a flashlight, holographic, and grenade launcher modifications, and grabbed 5 packs of 5.56mm ammo, 3 packs of 5.56 armor-piercing ammo, 2 packs of .357 Magnum rounds, 2 packs of 40mm grenades, and 2 packs of 40mm pulse grenades in his duffel bag. For a long-distance weapon, he grabbed a scoped hunting rifle, adding a bipod, a straight pull bolt, and a laser sight. He also grabbed 3 packs of .308 ammo and 2 packs of .308 armor-piercing ammo and put them in his duffel bag. Keeping his TAC 459mm pistol, he grabbed 6 frag grenades and 6 flash bangs and put them on his belt while he put 6 pulse grenades and a combat knife in his duffel bag. With his arsenal ready, he left the armory and relocked the blast door. He passed through the medical bay and put some Rad X, Rad Away, Stimpaks, Med X, Cat Eye, Buff Out, and other medical tools in his duffel bag. His final destination was the mess hall, where he grabbed packs of MREs, cans of pork and beans, boxes of Salisbury steak and sugar bombs, some Nuka-Cola bottles, and a couple whiskey bottles just for the hell of it. With his duffel bag almost full, Naruto made his way back to the main living area to see the maintenance Eyebot waiting for him. He grabbed his surrogate older brother's Pip-Boy and Riot armor and putting them into his duffel bag, completely filling it up. He grabbed the Desert Eagle and put in his second pistol holster. He then ordered the Eyebot to return the M16A4 and the anti-material rifle back in the armory. The Eyebot gave a positive beep and levitated the weapons in a blue light and disappeared into a maintenance shaft. With everything in order, Naruto walked out into the wasteland of New Jersey. The sky had a green tint to it from the nuclear explosion that happened just the other day. He looked at his Pip-Boy's map and made his way back to his former home to say goodbye one last time. After an hour of walking, he arrived at the ruined gates of Ihagakure. He walked through the village keeping the slow beeping of his Geiger counter in mind. As he went deeper into the village, the Geiger counter's beeping steadily increased. The whole town seemed to be drowned in green. Finally he reached town hall. He saw the bodies of Jonin laid on the ground dead, but no paladins, probably taken by the surviving forces back. He searched around until he finally found what he was looking for. Naruto kneeled before the body. "Hey Tu-san," spoke Naruto weakly as he looked at the unmoving body of his deceased father. "Don't worry Tu-san, I'll avenge you." Naruto slowly and delicately removed his father's signature cloak. "I'll destroy the Brotherhood of Steel and bring peace to the wasteland. It's the promise of a lifetime," promised Naruto. With what he had to say finished, Naruto took out a whiskey bottle and poured some on his father before lighting the flammable alcohol and burning his father's body. He moved around the village and used some scavenged alcohol bottles to burn as many bodies as he could. He didn't want the vulture merchants to steal their armor off their dead bodies. After he was done, he began walking out of the village but stopped when he heard a whimper. He grabbed the AK-47 of his bag and quietly stalked toward the noise. He arrived at a collapsed house and began looking through the rubble. After a few minutes of searching he found what was causing the noise. A child at least 9 years old. Naruto pulled the kid out to see an empty bottle of Rad X in his hand. The kid would have died if he hadn't taken this Rad X, thought Naruto as he carried the kid, bridal style, out of the village. Naruto kept walking and finally reached Omega Country Club in the pre-war city of Westfield. Luckily the town had been cleared of raiders and he set up camp inside the main house. He laid the child on a makeshift bed and had an IV of Rad away being put into his blood to combat the deadly radiation poisoning he was suffering. March 7, 2270. 1200 hours. Omega Country Club. Westfield, Jersey Deadlands. "My head hurts," moaned the kid as he tried to sit up. He looked around to see there was no one there until he heard approaching footsteps. "Who's there?" exclaimed the boy fearfully. "Oh, you're awake," spoke Naruto as he stepped out of the shadows dressed in his full armor. "What's your name?" asked Naruto as he kneeled before the child. "Konohamaru," answered the boy meekly. Naruto pulled off his mask and gave the boy a reassuring smile. "It's nice to meet you, Konohamaru. My name is Naruto." "Where are Ka-san and Tu-san?" asked Konohamaru fearfully. Naruto's smile was replaced with a frown. "I'm sorry, Konohamaru. But the village was destroyed and your parents are probably dead," replied Naruto sadly. Konohamaru looked down and began to tear up, but he was stopped when Naruto put an arm on his shoulder. "It's okay, I lost my family too. But we have each other and tomorrow we're going to look for other survivors," assured Naruto. Konohamaru threw himself into Naruto's arms and cried. Naruto just sat there and waited for the kid to finish. After 10 minutes Konohamaru cried himself to sleep. Naruto stood on the balcony of the main facility, using his hunting rifle to scan his surroundings. When the sun set, he returned back to his camp to find Konohamaru looking at the fire with his knees hugged to his chest. Naruto sat by the fire and grabbed 2 cans of pork and beans from his bag and used the fire to heat them up. After they were done he handed one to Konohamaru. The brown-haired boy just picked his food as he stared at the fire. "You should eat, would your Ka-san want you sulk around like this?" asked Naruto. "What's the point of living anymore? My family is dead, my home is destroyed, there isn't a point anymore," spoke Konohamaru depressingly. I asked myself the same thing when I escaped the village with my Ni-san. Konohamaru picked up his head. After my two-san died trying to protect the village and my Ni-san died to make sure I got away safely, I often asked myself what the point of living was. My reason for living is to keep the promise I made to my two-san and Ni-san. I promised my two-san that I would bring peace to the wasteland. Naruto tone turned darker. I promised my Ni-san that I would destroy the Brotherhood of Steel and kill every single one of them for what they did to our village. The Brotherhood of Steel? Questioned Konohamaru. They are a bunch of lunatics obsessed with technology. They destroyed our village because they wanted the pre-war data inside the vault's supercomputer. Explained Naruto. Konohamaru gripped his hands until his knuckles turned white. They destroyed our home. Just for technology, exclaimed Konohamaru in anger. Naruto nodded. I'll kill them, spoke Konohamaru in a whisper. I'll kill all of them. Yelled Konohamaru in rage. Don't let rage control your life, spoke Naruto. Find something to fuel your drive along with your hate. Make your family proud and survive. Help me bring peace to the wasteland and make sure no one ever suffers the same things we went through. Konohamaru put his head down and thought. After a few minutes brought his head back up. Okay. I promise to help you bring peace and kill the Brotherhood. Naruto smiled and they ate dinner. March 14, 2270. 0800 hours. Route 524. Allentown, Jersey Deadlands. Naruto and Konohamaru spent a week at the country club, waiting for the residual radiation in the atmosphere to disperse from the nuclear explosion through rain. In that time, Naruto taught Konohamaru to shoot and gave him Kakashi's Pip-Boy since all the children in their village received a Pip-Boy 3000 at 10 years old. Currently, Naruto and Konohamaru were walking through the streets of the pre-war Route 524 going toward a nearby town for information about any survivors from the Ihagakure incident. As they walked over the hill, they were forced to the ground when they heard an explosion. They crawled near the edge and saw the town of Allentown was being raided by vipers. What do we do, Ni-san? Asked Konohamaru. Naruto sat in thought for a minute until he grabbed the scoped hunting rifle from his back and handed it to Konohamaru while he took off his AK-47. Cover me from here, Konohamaru. I'm going to go down there and try to help. Konohamaru nodded and put a clip of .308 ammo in the rifle and set up a sniper's nest from the top of the hill. Naruto grabbed his AK-47 and snuck down the hill and threw himself against the wall of the nearest building. He kept his ears open and began walking with his AK-47 on point. He turned the corner and a viper suddenly turned the corner. Naruto pulled the trigger and put 5 bullets into his chest. The viper fell to the floor dead. Naruto looked through his pockets and took the caps and ammo he had. Naruto stalked deeper into the town. The vipers were too concentrated in their raid that they didn't even hear Naruto kill their viper companion. Sneaking through the residential backyards, he stopped when he reached the end of an alley leading onto the main street. He poked his head around the corner and looked through the streets to see the vipers were fighting over the spoils as they raided the general store and the small clinic. He gave a one-handed signal and that's when the chaos began. Sniper fire boomed as the viper leader fell to the floor without his head. The vipers were sent into confusion as they looked around for the shooter. Naruto used this confusion and left his cover. He pointed his AK-47 at the nearest viper and pulled the trigger. The viper didn't even know what was happening as 6 bullets tore through his chest. The other vipers noticed Naruto and immediately turned their guns on him. Naruto quickly hid behind a wall as shotgun shells and bullets exploded against it. The blonde waited a few seconds until he heard the vipers begin to reload their weapons. He left his cover and ran across the street while throwing a grenade. "Grenade!" cried one of the vipers. Boom! The vipers were scattered as they dived to the ground to avoid the shrapnel. Naruto skid across the street behind a burned-out car and used it for cover as the vipers resumed fire on his position. There was another sniper shot and another viper fell to the ground without his head. Naruto stood up and emptied his clip on the vipers when they stopped to reload. His bullets managed to hit 3 vipers in the legs and 2 in the head. He once again slumped against the car when the vipers resumed fire. The blonde reached into his ammo pouch and took out another 5.56mm clip, reloading his AK-47 before he held his assault rifle over his head and blind fired into the vipers. "Come out and die," yelled one of the vipers before his head was blown off his shoulders by a sniper bullet. Naruto emptied his clip and peeked through the corner to see there were only 5 Vipers left firing from the general store. When they stopped to reload, Naruto left cover and used his grenade launcher to send a 40mm grenade into the store, causing the entire store to light up in a fireball. Naruto slowly rose from his cover with his AK-47 pointed ahead of him. He slowly approached the dead Vipers and kicked them to make sure they were dead. When he made sure they were all dead, he signaled Konohamaru to come down. A few minutes later, Konohamaru came down the hill with the hunting rifle strapped over his shoulder. "What now?" asked the brown-haired boy. Naruto sighed. "Just look for anything useful." Konohamaru nodded and began going through the dead Vipers' bodies, looking for ammo, caps, medicine, and other useful items. Naruto walked through the town, seeing the dead bodies of adults and children. There were homes and buildings ablaze and destroyed. He entered the town clinic and saw the town doctor was nailed to the wall. He ignored the dead body and looked through the medical supplies, taking the Stimpaks, Med-X, and other medicines. After taking everything useful, he left the clinic and met Konohamaru back in front of the destroyed general store. "What did you find?" asked Naruto. "Nothing much, some ammo, food, and water," replied Konohamaru. "Okay, let's get out of here." As Naruto and Konohamaru started leaving town, a blue light suddenly engulfed them and began levitating them into the sky. "Oi, what the hell is this?" exclaimed Naruto. "Ni-san, what's happening?" stammered Konohamaru. The night sky then gave an audible boom that could be heard miles away. Naruto and Konohamaru were now out of reach, and out of this world. March 14, 2270. Unknown time. Unknown location. Naruto opened his eyes weakly, his vision still blurry. Suddenly his eyes widened when he saw something he only read in science fiction comics. On both sides of him were diminutive, hairless, yellow-green-skinned humanoid creatures. Both had short limbs, unbelievably large heads with black-lidded eyes showing no iris. Their hands appeared to have only 3 long fingers which slightly resembled suction cups. They wore bright, alloy-colored suits with silver boots. He seethed and thrashed against his restraints. "What the hell is this? Who the hell are you freaks?" raged Naruto, only for one of the creatures to grab a metallic pole-like object from its waist and poke him, delivering a nasty shock to his body. As the electricity settled down in his body, he observed the 2 extraterrestrials converse with one another, giving clicks and babbles before one pressed several buttons on a monitor, bringing up a large tubular machine with a massive needle at the end of it. Naruto began to struggle against his restraints as the needle advanced toward him, only for him to fail against the restraints. The machine gave out a blue light and began to scan the blonde. Naruto stared at the light before feeling the intense pain of the needle enter his chest, causing him to pass out. March 28, 2270. 1600 hours. Earth exosphere. Mothership Zeta, interrogation room. Naruto was brought into an unfamiliar room. It was filled with a control panel and a small post with a circular hologram along with many buttons. The aliens that brought him pressed a couple buttons before babbling at the blonde and pointing at the recorder. "Bite me," snarled Naruto. The alien didn't like his response and delivered a shock to his body with its baton. Naruto grit his teeth in pain as electricity coursed through his body. The alien kept babbling and repeatedly zapped him. "Okay, I'll do it, just stop," shouted Naruto, causing the alien to stop his assault. The blonde weakly got up, using the control panel as support, getting close to the recorder. "My name is Naruto Namikaze. 2 weeks ago we were abducted from Allentown, NJ, after a band of Vipers attacked and raided the village. Killing all the Vipers, my brother and I gathered what supplies we could and began leaving town. It was then that we were trapped in a blue light and brought up to this ship, I guess. When I look out windows I can see the earth and stars. I can only guess that those science fiction nerds that preached about alien invasions were right. Except these aliens were 200 years too late to annihilate humans. We did a pretty good job ourselves. I haven't seen my brother in weeks and they better not hurt them or else they will wish they invaded another planet after I'm finished with th. He was cut off as an alien began angrily babbling at him and kept striking him with its baton. Damn it, you little green bitch. I did what you wanted," cursed Naruto as he fell to the floor. The aliens pushed him out of the room and back to his cell, which was blocked by an electrical barrier. February 14, 2277. 1100 hours. Earth exosphere. Mothership Zeta, holding cells. Naruto sat on the floor of his cell, gritting his teeth in anger as he witnessed the mechanical claw dragged another human to be tested on by their alien masters. Most humans that were taken away didn't come back because they either died at the experimentation table or mutated into half-alien abominations. Over the years of their captivity, his captors had continuously experimented on his body, injecting him with many unknown substances and alien DNA strands. He, along with his brother and other lucky humans, had gained several beneficial mutations from these experiments, and hadn't been mutating into abominations. Unlike the others though, the aliens had a high interest in him and his brother. The only reason he could come up with for this was because they were born in vaults or were born from vault dwellers, meaning their DNA wasn't contaminated from daily long-term exposure to radiation, allowing their experiments to settle properly in their DNA. Among some of their experiments, Naruto gained the ability to telepathy. It wasn't strong enough to lift objects, but he could still read and speak in the minds of others. Another experiment involving Naruto had been them injecting a metallic serum called adamantium into his skeleton, making his bones indestructible and resistant against energy weapons. Naruto had learned the hard way, when his captors had used him as a target practice. His skin would only have faint scorch marks when shot with an energy weapon. "Hey, Ni-san," communicated Konohamaru telepathically. Konohamaru had also been subject to much experimentation. Their experiments gave Konohamaru of telepathy. He was able to read and speak into minds, as well as download information from people's brains. He could levitate large objects using only his mind. "What is it, Konohamaru?" asked Naruto mentally. "When are we going to execute the coup?" questioned the brown-haired youth. Naruto thought about it for a minute and looked at his Pip-Boy, going over the guard rotations he had noted on his Pip-Boy. "In 1 hour, the guards will bring us our food. From there we ambush them and get some equipment." Telepathically, Konohamaru mentally nodded and there was silence until the plan could be carried out. True to his word, an hour later the guards disabled a barrier to throw a tray of food in the cell. Naruto used this chance to grab an alien by the head and crush it, covering his hand in green blood. The guard aliens immediately sounded the alarm and charged at Naruto with their alien atomizer. Naruto acted quickly and grabbed the dead alien's body to use as a shield. The aliens fired completely, turning their companion's dead body to ash. Naruto then jumped forward and grabbed the alien's blaster, overpowering him and then landing a devastating punch to his head, killing it. Naruto used the blaster and pointed at the last alien, hitting him in the head and turning him to dust. Konohamaru walked out of his cell with his hand embedded into the chest of an alien. With the flick of a wrist he threw the alien's body against the wall. "Ha, you thought that battery could do something to me?" mocked Konohamaru to the dead aliens. "We don't have time for this. Let's go," ordered Naruto. Konohamaru nodded and followed him to the guard post. Konohamaru got on the control panel and quickly dead-bolted the door and hacked into the turret system to attack their alien captors. Naruto searched through the alien container until he found a couple suits of leather armor. "It'll have to do," frowned Naruto as he put on the leather armor and threw Konohamaru another pair. The brown-haired youth nodded in thanks and put on the armor. They were knocked out of their thoughts when the inch steel door was being cut through from the other side. Naruto leaned against the wall with the atomic blaster in hand. Konohamaru on the other hand was still at the control panel. "What are you doing?" asked Naruto, his finger on the trigger as the door was almost cut completely through. Konohamaru didn't respond as he finished the last couple of console commands and ran toward his cell. Naruto looked at him skeptically but then followed after him. "Mind telling me what we're doing?" asked Naruto as he entered Konohamaru's cell. "You'll see," was his only reply. There was a loud boom as the door was blasted from its hinges. Naruto scowled and fired on the aliens and security drones that were flooding the holding bay. Alien after alien turned to ash as Naruto decimated them with his pinpoint accuracy and impervious defense against energy weapons. Ni-san. Naruto was knocked out of his thoughts when he turned to see Konohamaru waiting for him on a claw. Naruto realized what his surrogate brother was doing and jumped onto the claw as it began moving. The aliens began yelling in anger as their subjects disappeared into the bowels of the ship. The control panel destroyed, preventing them from bringing the claw back. The claw finally reached their destination in the maintenance level. They crouched and stalked through the corridors, avoiding patrols of alien soldiers as they walked through the halls in search of them. Finally, after a few hours, the aliens gave up looking for them and abandoned the maintenance level to search on other levels. The duo gave a sigh of relief as they were left alone in the emptiness of the waste disposal section. "I can't believe that worked," said Konohamaru. Naruto nodded. "There aren't too many patrols that go through here. We can find guns and food here. Tomorrow, after we arms ourselves, we can take the fight to them," spoke Naruto with a grin. Konohamaru mirrored the grin. "I look forward to it. They're gonna pay for what they did." Naruto ran through the engine room of the ship carrying a duffel bag full of parts he had stolen from the robot assembly level. Ducking under massive steam pipes, he finally reached the entrance to the engineering core. Once he was inside, he was met with countless security drones that were carrying ion cannons and mini-guns. He maneuvered past the security drones just in time as they opened fire on the pursuing alien soldiers. He watched with satisfaction as his former alien masters were cut down by the very machines they had created to protect them. It had been over 3 weeks since Naruto and Konohamaru had escaped and made their base of operations in the maintenance level. The day after they escaped, the duo had left the maintenance level, armed to the teeth, and tried to take the bridge of the ship. Their former alien masters didn't underestimate their power, and the duo was met with heavy resistance. They barely got to the cryogenic laboratory before they were pushed back by security drones and alien soldiers. Luckily, they were able to free 20 humans from their frozen sleep before retreating back to their base of operations. Since then, they fought against their alien captors and were able to push them out of the maintenance level, putting the waste disposal and part of the engineering core under their control. They had been invaluable in helping Konohamaru to build, repair, and modify both alien and regular weapons, but also reprogramming and modifying captured security drones. Naruto walked through the halls and headed toward the maintenance level where he would find Konohamaru and Richard Grant, a former admiral of pre-war America, who had been abducted in 2077 right before the bombs dropped. Grant had been an invaluable ally in his forces, helping coordinate attacks with high probabilities of success and leading their men during Naruto's absence. "Ni-san, how did it go?" asked Konohamaru as he looked up from his work. The blonde ninja smirked and threw the duffel bag full of robot parts on his workbench. The brown-haired boy thanked his surrogate brother before taking the bag and picking a few select parts. The teenage genius took the parts and went over toward a separate work area that held a mean-looking security drone. What set this drone apart from the others was that this drone had at least 3 inches of steel plating covering its hull. It had 2 miniguns mounted on its shoulders, ion cannon and a missile launcher where its hands would be, and a grenade launcher on its wrist. Konohamaru ducked under the drone and added the parts into the drone's infrastructure. Once he was finished, Konohamaru activated a nearby alien console and started creating a battle program that he would upload into the drone. Naruto looked around the room to see countless other young and old minds that Konohamaru had begun teaching. A total of 25 scientists and engineers worked in the engineering core, helping Konohamaru with his work and learning from the genius. "How long until this robot is ready to fight?" questioned the blonde. "It shouldn't take too long, Ni-san. 1 hour tops," replied Konohamaru. Naruto nodded in understanding. "Commander." Naruto turned to see one of his subordinates behind him. "What is it?" asked Naruto. "Admiral Grant wishes to speak to you," relayed the grunt. Naruto nodded and dismissed the soldier before leaving the engineering core and headed toward the command room. Naruto walked through the waste disposal area. He saw soldiers cleaning their modified assault rifles, created by Konohamaru using scavenged AK-47s, G-36Cs, and M16s, and switching alien blaster parts into the rifles. By doing this, Konohamaru created an energy assault rifle that could fire alien power modules at over 600 rounds per minute. Other soldiers loaded power modules into custom clips from large crates of modules they had taken after a raid of the weapons lab. During the last few weeks, Naruto and General Grant had led countless raids on the weapons lab, where they took ammo and weapons, the cryogenic labs, where they freed countless humans to join them, and the robot assembly, where they stole countless drones to reprogram and modify. The blonde walked into a large room that had been cleared and had a large holographic table with a schematic of the Zeta along with documents and weapons scattered around the room. On the other side of the table stood a man in his late 40s with gray hair and a medium build, wearing a green army overcoat that reached his shins, a pair of black combat boots, and a modified M16 slumped over his shoulder. "Naruto, I hope your mission was a success?" asked Grant. Naruto nodded in confirmation as he joined Grant looking at a blueprint of the alien ship. With Naruto in the room, Grant began his explanation. "While you were gone, the green bastards launched an attack on engineering core level. We were able to push them back, but they're getting bold. They increased the security on the hangar, the cryo lab, and the cargo hold. From what we've managed to intercept in their transmissions, they are preparing to receive reinforcement for another alien ship on the other side of the planet. I've prepared our troops for one last push. If we let them get reinforcements, then it won't be long before we're wiped out. We have a total of 80 soldiers and 40 drones." Grant motioned for 2 files on the table. "I've taken the liberty of drawing up 2 plans of attack you can choose from. Plan A involves splitting our forces in 4 and assaulting the hangars, the cryo lab, the robot assembly, and the bridge all at the same time. This plan may fail since we would be spreading our forces thin, but we would take the entire ship in one go. Plan B is to assault the bridge with our entire force and take it. This plan has the biggest chance of taking the bridge, but if we concentrate only on the bridge, any other aliens guarding the other sections of the ship may regroup with their allies." Naruto thought over everything his general had told him. On one hand he would take the bridge easily, but on the other he would take control of the ship but might fail in taking the bridge. In the end, Naruto chose Plan A as his preferred plan of attack. Grant nodded in understanding before calling over a subordinate. "Inform all the captains to prepare their troops for battle," ordered Grant. The grunt gave a nod and saluted before leaving to relay his superior's orders. "Admiral, I plan on leading the assault on the bridge. Konohamaru will lead the assault on the cryo lab, and I trust that you can lead the attack on the hangar." "Of course, sir," replied Admiral Grant. Naruto nodded and left the command room to prepare for the upcoming battle. As he walked through the halls, he stopped in the common area where he noticed Toshiro Kago, meditating with his sword in front of him. Naruto walked up to the 15th century samurai. "How are you doing?" asked Naruto in his native tongue. The old samurai opened his eyes and spoke. "This is all very confusing. I still do not understand what is happening," spoke the old samurai truthfully. Naruto nodded in understanding. The man in front of him was a living antique, an actual samurai that hailed from the famous Oda clan of feudal Japan over 800 years ago. When they had first rescued him, he was unable to communicate with the rescue team, but the academy had taught him Japanese since much of their code was simply Japanese that few people even knew anymore, and while Toshiro's dialect was older, Naruto was the only one that could understand him. "There is going to be a battle. I would like you to join me in the assault of our enemies," spoke the ninja. The old samurai stood up and bowed. "It would be an honor. My blade is yours to command, Naruto-sama." Naruto nodded and thanked him before he left to another part of his base. A couple of minutes of walking and he reached laboratory again, where he found Konohamaru with a pissed-off expression on his face as a dark-skinned woman with a shaved head berated him. "You moron. Of course the robot can't get off the ground. Adding all this firepower and you expect this hunk of metal to still be able to move. Hey, who's the one that got their head messed with? If you're so bright, you figure out a solution," barked back the brown-haired teen. "Fine, I will," replied Soma. Naruto walked up to Konohamaru and asked what was wrong. The teen sighed exasperatedly. "I may have miscalculated a little the weight, allowing the thrusters to get off the ground." "A little? A behemoth would have a hard time trying to pick this thing up," yelled Soma from under the drone. A tick mark appeared on Kono's forehead. "Well, I'm sorry, princess. We can't all be perfect like you," yelled Kono back sarcastically. "Enough," spoke Naruto, prompting both arguing engineers to stop their yelling. Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. This would be a major setback. "How long until you can fix it?" asked the blonde leader. Kono rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. "Well, something as complex as this. Maybe 2, 4. Naruto rubbed his temple to relieve the headache he was experiencing. "Today, Kono." Kono gulped. 6 hours, spoke the brown-haired engineer. Naruto once again sighed in annoyance. The assault was supposed to take place in 3 hours. "Fine, but try to get it done in 3. The assault will take place in 3 hours and this robot could really improve our chance of winning," He pointed toward Kono and Soma. "You two will lead the assault into the robot assembly. Both of you are the most familiar with the technology there." Both engineers nodded in understanding before focusing their attention back to the robot while Naruto left the room. He continued to walk and reached the makeshift medic station in the waste disposal area. He entered the room to find Elliot Turkorian, a pre-war doctor and army medic they had found in cryogenic storage. The white-haired doctor was looking through some patient files and noticed Naruto standing at the door. "Oh, can I help you, Commander?" Naruto nodded his head. "There is going to be a final assault on the 4 main areas of the ship," spoke Naruto. "There will probably be many casualties and wounded. I just wanted to know if your students are ready?" asked Naruto. The doctor nodded in confirmation. He had spent the last 2 weeks training a select few in battlefield medicine so that they could serve as medics in their squads. He also trained another batch in the basics of medicine to serve as doctors back in the medic wing. Being a civilian doctor before he was drafted, he was very knowledgeable in medicine, anatomy, and surgery. "Good," spoke Naruto. "I also wanted to ask you to lead the assault into the cryo labs." Elliot looked skeptical. "Are you sure, Commander? I was only a private in the army." "I don't think I'm qualified to lead the troops," spoke Elliot in slight fear. The man had been drafted into the army. He wasn't really soldier material and definitely leader material. Naruto waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense, I'm sure you're more than qualified, you just don't give yourself enough credit. Besides, the real reason I want you to lead the assault is because you have a highest chance of safely unfreezing any other frozen humans," explained Naruto. Elliot nodded in understanding. "Of course, Commander. If that's the reason, then I accept the position," replied Elliot. "Good, then I leave you to prepare." With his work done, the blonde shinobi left. Elliot watched as his commander left. Elliot didn't know why, but he had a feeling the man would lead their little ragtag group of rebels to greatness. Pushing his thoughts aside, Elliot left his office and headed toward the medical wing to prepare his biogel. He knew they were going to need it. March 4, 2277. 1200 hours. Earth exosphere. Mothership Zeta, maintenance level. Naruto stood in the front of his troops, donning his scavenged riot armor and his M16 slumped over his shoulder. He was flanked by Admiral Grant, who would lead the assault into the hangars, Konohamaru, who would lead the assault into the robot assembly, and Elliot Turkorian, who would lead the assault into the cryo labs. "I'm sure you all know why you are here," announced Naruto. "For years, these creatures have been abducting human after human to perform their sick experiments. To them we are nothing but toys for them to open up and torture. Well, no more. We escaped and rebelled against our alien masters. Now it's time to take the fight to them." All the soldiers shouted in agreement. "We are going to fight to take our freedom or die trying. And when all is said and done, our children will look back on this day and know of our sacrifice and bravery." All the soldiers once again shouted in agreement, adrenaline pumping and morale high. They all separated into their assault groups. Naruto grabbed his assault rifle and chambered a round before sending Kono a signal. The team nodded in understanding and the massive drone, dubbed Black Death, came alive and started out the massive doors. After a few seconds, drone after drone activated and headed out the doors into the engineering core's crossroad. The alien defenders immediately fired on the enemies, taking some of the weaker drones but no even scratching the Black Death. The drones' battle protocols activated and they turned their weapons on the green aliens. Mini-guns and drone cannons fired as they ripped through the green creatures, ripping off limbs and destroying other drones. The aliens clicked and babbled in confusion and anger. The massive drone aimed its missile launcher and drone cannon at the barricades and fired, ripping holes into the barricades before it deactivated, having used up all its energy. Red sirens and lights lit up the ship as alien soldiers were dispatched to stop the rebels. Seeing their chances, the commanders stormed the crossroads and lead their assaults. Naruto lead his men toward the bridge, Grant lead his men toward the hangars, Elliot led his men toward the cryo labs, and Konohamaru led his men into the robot assembly. March 4, 2277. 1230 hours. Earth exosphere. Mothership Zeta, cryogenic lab. Elliot led his 25 men as into the cryo labs and was immediately met with resistance. Aliens on the other side of the room fired their blaster rifles while his men were forced to take cover. He wouldn't be lying when he said he felt scared, but he steeled his resolve and got up from his cover, return fire. ordered the medic. His soldiers obeyed and stood up to aim their rifles. Squeezing the trigger, blue beams of energy left the barrel in rapid succession, hitting a few in the head while others hid behind crates and walls. Reaching into his equipment pouch, Elliot pulled out a small block of C4 and threw it at the alien barricade. Pressing the wireless trigger, the plastic explosive reduced the wall into nothing as Elliot and his men stormed the confused aliens. Go, go, go! Elliot jumped out from his cover and aimed at the nearest alien, putting a beam of energy in its head. His men did the same as they spread out and decimated the green creatures in their confusion. Slowly pushing the aliens back, Elliot reached the entrance into the operation chamber, the area in which the alien had conducted their twisted experiments on human guinea pigs. He approached the door to find it was bolted shut. 15 of you will remain here. Finish off any stragglers, and secure this section of the cryo lab. The rest will follow me, ordered Elliot. Yes, sir, was echoed by his soldiers. One of his soldiers reached into his equipment pouch and attached a stick of C4 on the metal door. Breaching, warned the soldier. Everyone turned away from the door as it exploded and ripped the door from its hinges. Elliot was the first to act. He raised his rifle and rushed into the room. The aliens didn't even register him as they were thrown back by the blast. Time seemed to slow down as Elliot took an aim and put an energy beam in 5 aliens' head in the span of 6 seconds. Time resumed normally as the aliens returned fire and forced the humans to take cover. Elliot raised his rifle over his head and blind fired into their line. He felt the rifle clip click and grabbed another clip from his waist. Reloading, yelled Elliot as his soldiers fired on the aliens to keep them pinned down. One of the rebels rose from his cover but was hit by an alien laser beam. He screamed in pain as he fell to the floor, clutching his side. Medic, yelled a soldier. Elliot saw a soldier pull the injured rebel into cover and perform first aid. Grabbing a grenade from his belt, Elliot pulled the pin and threw it at the aliens. Frag out, warned Elliot. His soldiers immediately ducked into cover. The grenade landed behind a few aliens and exploded, scattering the diminutive green men in the air. Advance, ordered Elliot. His troops obeyed and pushed forward, putting a hole in any alien still alive. They were taken by surprise when the wall suddenly exploded outward, sending them sprawling to the ground. Drones poured into the room and charged their ion cannons. Shit. Get to cover, yelled Elliot before diving to the ground and narrowly passing under a ball of unstable energy. It landed over 10 feet away before exploding in a blast of force and electricity. Elliot felt his leg was on fire. He looked down to see it was a sharp blade of broken metal piercing his leg. He reached down but immediately stopped when his leg stung. He was suddenly forced to put pressure on his leg when he dodged an alien beam. He reached for his rifle and pulled the trigger, putting 6 bullets into an alien before it could kill him. He looked around to see 5 of his soldiers were already dead and the last 10 were pinned down. Elliot grit his teeth in frustration and looked down at his injured leg. He grabbed the metal shard and ripped it out before reaching into his equipment pouch and injecting a stimpack into his leg. The medicine in the needle accelerated the cell production in his leg and his leg healed completely in a few seconds. With his leg healed, Elliot reloaded his rifle and looked around the corner to see his men were still pinned down. Reaching into his pouch, he grabbed an EMP grenade. What he was planning was risky. Both the drones and their energy weapons relied on electronic components. Using the EMP would render their rifles useless for a few minutes, but with their size they could easily overpower the aliens. Elliot pulled the pin and threw the EMP at the drones. The grenade landed and released a pulse of electromagnetic energy and fried the electronic circuits inside the drones, rendering them useless. The drones are down, yelled one of the soldiers. Switch to hand-to-hand combat, ordered the white-haired medic. His soldiers obeyed and hung their rifles over their shoulders before charging the defenseless alien soldiers. The alien soldiers just clicked and babbled in confusion when their weapons stopped firing. Some even started running away when they saw the human soldiers charging at them. The rebels slaughtered the aliens as they drew their combat knives and stabbed the aliens in the heads or bodies, leaving them to die in a puddle of their green blood. Elliot himself grabbed one of the aliens and smashed his head into the ground, reducing it into nothing but mush. Take that, you bastard. Finishing off the last of the aliens, their rifles lit up, signifying they had recovered from the EMP pulse. Elliot led his men to the final door of the cryo lab, the mass storage section. Alright men, this is the last room to secure. We've almost won this, spoke Elliot. His subordinates cheered. Elliot reached into his equipment pouch and took out 2 blocks of C4. He pointed at Squad Delta. Go around and breach the wall behind the defenders. Kill as many you take by surprise. The squad captain nodded at his orders and the squad left to complete them. Placing the C4 on the metal door, Elliot and his remaining men waited on the sides for the signal needed for them to blow their own door. There was a tense silence until an explosion rocked the floor and laser weapon fire sounded on the inside of the room. Not wasting any time, Elliot pressed the detonator and blew the door to pieces. His soldiers stormed the room and fired on the remaining aliens. Elliot pulled the trigger and put a flurry of shots into the alien squad captain, signaling the end of the assault with the rebels as the victors. March 4, 2277. 12:30 hours. Earth exosphere. Mothership Zeta, robot assembly. Konohamaru watched the door to the robot assembly explode off its hinges. He let his men enter ahead of him and entered last. He was immediately forced to take cover as Guardian drones and alien soldiers fired on them. Return fire, commanded the brown-haired teen. His soldiers obeyed and fired on the enemy, taking countless drones down as the alien soldiers took cover. Konohamaru quickly stood up and raced across the top platform, narrowly dodging alien laser beams and drone ion orbs. He slid across the floor and landed next to Soma as she was firing her combat shotgun on the aliens. We're pinned down, but I have an idea, yelled Konohamaru so that Soma could hear him through the explosions. Konohamaru leaned in and explained his plan. By the end, Soma looked skeptical, but the serious look on Konohamaru's face forced her to accept it. Cover me, ordered Soma. The rebels fired down on the aliens, forcing them to take cover. Meanwhile, Konohamaru slouched against the wall as he closed his eyes and concentrated. Suddenly he opened his eyes to see he wasn't in his body anymore. It was a feeling of weightlessness in the air. He moved down past the aliens and toward the large robotic assembly machine. Reaching inside the machine, he pulled out every single coolant regulator and watched as the alien fuel cell began to overload. He was suddenly pulled back to his body. It was like being hit by a tidal wave of water and his head was pounding. He looked down to see he was bleeding from his nose, quickly wiping off the blood. He could hear the machine begin to overload and the alien babble in confusion and fear. Take cover, yelled Soma. All the rebels took cover. The whole room shook as the explosion ripped the aliens and enemy drones into pieces, creating a massive hole into another room. Advance, ordered the brunette scientist. The rebels slowly advanced, making sure there were no enemies. Konohamaru looked around to see there was only the main robot assembly room and the engine room left to capture and secure. Soma, led half of the men and take the engine room. I take the main assembly room, ordered Konohamaru. The dark-skinned wastelander nodded in confirmation and led 10 soldiers down a hall toward the engine room. The rest of you follow me, ordered Konohamaru. His men nodded and reloaded their rifles. Konohamaru entered the destroyed robot assembly machine and walked through the assembly line, careful not to trip on the scattered parts of destroyed robots or smoking alien flesh, with his men following closely behind. He entered the robot storage room, robots stored inside large cylindrical containers. He slowly walked inside the room, carefully surveying every part of the room for signs of life. All right, secure the room, ordered Konohamaru. His men nodded and spread out as they searched for alien soldiers. After a few minutes of searching, Konohamaru thought that the room was cleared, but he was taken by surprise when the drone storage containers opened and every single Guardian and support drone power-up and alien turrets emerged from the ceiling. Shit, ambush, warned the brunette engineer. Take defensive positions, he ordered. Raising his rifle, Konohamaru fired an entire clip into a Guardian and watched as it fell. He was forced to throw himself on the floor to dodge an ion grenade sent from a drone cannon. Reaching into his equipment pouch, he pulled a grenade and threw it at a group of drones. Boom! A group of drones were torn apart by the explosion and reduced to scrap metal. Konohamaru quickly grabbed his rifle and reloaded. The entire room was in chaos. Ion grenades exploded all over the room and aliens were entering through the teleporters. Damn it, I should have known this would happen. Konohamaru berated himself. He looked around to see all his men were pinned down and heavily injured. He, himself, was being forced to take cover behind a steel pillar while aliens fired on him. Konohamaru predicted the outcomes of this battle if it continued this way. He knew there was only one way to turn the tide. He closed his eyes and concentrated on his telekinetic powers. He opened them again to the same feeling of weightlessness as always. He could feel the pounding headache already creeping up on him. His powers were still in their infancy and he couldn't control it for long until he returned to normal. He raced throughout the room, picking up drones and aliens before smashing them against walls, catching ion grenades and throwing them right back, causing drones and aliens to be ripped apart by explosions, and destroying teleportation pads to prevent any more aliens from getting into the room. Everything was quiet, there wasn't a single noise except the scattered footsteps of boots on metal. Soldiers slowly walked around the room kicking alien carcasses to make sure they were dead. Others were getting over their shock of drones and aliens flying throughout the room and smashing against walls. Konohamaru slumped against the wall. He clutched his head and bit back the scream of pain that was trying to escape his throat. His nose was bleeding profusely from the mental exertion of using his telekinetic powers for an extended amount of time. "Captain, are you all right?" asked one of his soldiers. "I'm fine, R. Robinson," he replied. He tried to stand but suddenly fell to the floor. "Captain. Captain, are you all right?" Konohamaru could hear his subordinate, but at the moment, he felt weak. The exertion of using his powers to win the battle took most of his energy, but he was glad that they won. He was glad they had taken control. A small smile crossed his face. What he had done was just a small step toward bringing peace to the chaotic wasteland below. He knew in his heart that his brother would lead them into greatness. He didn't need his super intelligence just to know that. As his thoughts finished, he could hear his subordinate look and call out to him in worry, "I'm fine," assured Konohamaru as he got up on his feet. "I just need to get some rest. Using my powers took a lot of energy," explained the brunette scientist. "Secure this section of the ship and flush out every alien here. I don't want a single one left alive. When that is done, inform me," he ordered strongly. His subordinate nodded and saluted as he left to relay his commander's orders. Konohamaru let out a relieved sigh as he leaned against the wall to catch his breath. "It's almost over," he assured himself, before grabbing his rifle and heading out to command his men. March 4, 2277. 12:30 hours. Earth exosphere. Mothership Zeta, Hangar Bay. Admiral Grant entered the hangars via the engineering core. His men and any remaining robots left from the initial assault behind him. Out of all the phases of the assault, his was the most important. It was important because if they failed to take the ship, then alien reinforcements could attack and recapture the ship. He was fairly certain the aliens outnumbered them by 10 to 1. There were only so many humans in cryostorage, and he knew there were hundreds of thousands of aliens cryogenically frozen, same as them in the cryostorage. Grant went into the hangars to come out in the prototype testing room. He motioned for his men to go ahead. They obeyed and advanced with their rifles raised, ready for anything. It didn't take long before a swarm of aliens and security drones appeared suddenly from teleporters and fired their blaster rifles at the humans. The human resistance returned fire and the aliens were massacred as the human resistance fired down on the aliens with their automatic rifles. "Keep up the fire, men. Don't leave a single one alive," shouted Grant. His men obeyed and didn't let up the laser rifle fire. Limbs and robot parts were scattered on the floor while green blood painted the walls as the aliens were massacred. The alien command pushed their soldiers forward, knowingly allowing them to be massacred as to buy time for their reinforcements to arrive. Finally, the aliens exhausted any soldiers they could spare and were forced to retreat. Grant saw his enemies were running away. They had completely devastated the enemy forces so much that they hadn't lost a single man. But Grant didn't become an admiral of the US Navy for his looks. He knew that they were only trying to stall him, probably for their reinforcements to arrive. He ordered his men forward while leaving a few to monitor the teleporters and make sure the aliens don't try to sneak up behind them. "Get the X-2KG launchers ready," ordered Grant, using the actual term for the fat man that was lost in time. 4 of his soldiers came forward holding the infamous mini-nuke launchers, except these were specially modified by Konohamaru. These launchers had alien power modules rigged into the catapult system to give it more range and power cells rigged inside the nuke's core to give a more devastating explosion. The first soldier fired, all the others were standing on the far opposite of the wall. He pulled the trigger and immediately hit the deck. The nuke made contact with the wall and resulted in a great blue explosion that pushed people back even as they held the rail and crouched on the floor. A blue mushroom cloud rose from the impact site but dispersed to reveal the wall riddled with cracks. Grant motioned for the next soldier to move up, causing everyone to once again brace themselves for the shockwaves. Grant knew that they would be expecting them to enter the main hangar through the doorway, leaving them open to an ambush. By storming in through the wall, they could take them by surprise and avoid an ambush. The next soldier positioned himself the same way as the first and fired, causing the wall to creak inwards. The third soldier didn't waste any time as he fired into the wall, causing it to give way. "Give 'em hell!" The rebels gave a war cry and stormed into the main hangar. The aliens were barely prepared for the assault as they had expected the humans to enter through the doorway. They didn't know they had a weapon capable of reducing a 10-inch steel wall to nothing, but had heard the pounding of the wall and planned accordingly. Countless human rebels ran through the massive hole, guns blazing. The human rebels fired their assault rifles and threw grenades into the enemy lines. The aliens were better prepared and fired their alien rifles and blasters while lobbing cell grenades, the alien equivalent to a frag grenade. Both sides took heavy losses, but the rebels advanced only by sheer ferocity. Grant grit his teeth as he emptied his Desert Eagle in the aliens' direction. The blood of both his soldiers and his enemies covered his trench coat. The hangar was massive, at least a mile wide, with hundreds of ships, both transport and battleships, lined up. The gateway into space was a thin layer of plasma that allowed ships to enter easily and kept air inside the hangar at the same time. Even though they were experiencing losses, morale was high as the rebels pushed the aliens into a corner. Just as their demise was imminent, 3 ships entered the hangar, a troop transport and 2 battleships. The battleships immediately began mowing down the rebels while the transport began its landing process. "Rivers, knock them out of the sky," ordered Grant. The soldier yelled in understanding and swung his nuke launcher to his hands. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a modified mini-nuke. The blue wires connected power cells to the uranium core. Placing the nuke inside, the soldier took aim at the battleship and fired. The nuke sailed through the air and impacted on the battleship, engulfing the ship in flames and causing it to have a domino effect. With the flaming ship crashing into the second battleship, and the second battleship being knocked off its course just as it fired a pair of thermomissiles into the transport and causing it to crash land. "Box them in," commanded Grant. His soldiers obeyed and surrounded the downed transport, waiting for the reinforcements to leave the ship. The door was kicked open and an alien stumbled out of the blazing ship while bleeding profusely. He didn't last long as a soldier put a bullet in his head, either out of pity or hatred. Grant commanded his men to search the ship for valuables and kill off any survivors. He took a few men and made his way toward the hangar control room. He searched the room and could the hangar control panel. Reaching into his pocket, he took out an alien memory chip and inserted it into the control panel. The panel clicked and beeped before an alarm sounded in the hangar and a 30-inch thick steel door covered the entrance from the outside space. "Sir." Grant turned to see one of his lieutenants behind him. "What is it?" asked the admiral. "We've secured the hangar, sir. We've also cleared the alien menace from the hangar and are sending a group to clear and secure the cargo hold of any enemies. There are some pockets of resistance, but they will be dealt with quickly," reported the lieutenant. Grant nodded in understanding and dismissed his soldier. The former U.S. admiral walked through the hangars. Soldiers ran across the deck carrying crates of supplies taken from the alien transport and other carried thermomissiles taken from the battleship wrecks. Other soldiers were piling the carcasses of dead aliens for the support drones to drop in the incinerator. Grant took a cigarette and lit it as he watched his men work on cleaning the wrecks and moved crates of weapons. Grant knew that the era of the United States was over, but he didn't care. The old government was extremely corrupt. Politicians and even the president would take bribes from monopoly companies such as Robco, Chrysler Motors, General Atomics International, and IBM for them to look the other way as they polluted the earth and breaking the law, and allowed them to use the U.S. military as their own private army. He knew that the corruption inside the government led to its massive inflation, debt, and eventually, its downfall. Grant was the farthest thing from a traitor. He loved his country and everything it had stood for when it was first started: freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But soon even he could see that the United States was a cesspool of greed and corruption. He had been deployed to China and was the one that had laid siege on Beijing. The siege was long and bloody, but they had pushed the Chinese forces into a corner at the Forbidden Palace. Just as Grant was going to order the assault, a nuclear missile exploded inside the palace. He had thought he had died that day in the blast, only to wake up soon after strapped to a table as some creature dissected him. After a few weeks of experiments he was frozen in cryogenics and awoken 200 years later. The rest is history. He knew that all government types had their flaws, but he trusted Naruto. The young man proved that he cared for his men more than himself. He had volunteered to go alone on a rescue mission when he himself told him it was paramount to suicide. Naruto didn't care and managed to rescue his men, solidifying their loyalty to him. If anyone could be a leader, it was Naruto, and Grant and all his men would follow him as he created a new nation. March 4, 2277. 12:30 hours. Earth exosphere. Mothership Zeta, observation deck to bridge. Naruto ran into the destabilization chamber of the ship. The controls were already on lockdown, so they had 10 minutes until the aliens could separate the bridge from the rest of the ship. Climbing the stairs, he came across the door to the observation deck. He entered the room and immediately fired his M16 at the aliens who had set up a defense point in the room. Energy blasts impacted the doorway as he took cover behind a chair. He grabbed a grenade from his belt and threw it behind the aliens' cover. Boom! The blast sent some of the creatures flying into the wall and ripped limbs from their bodies. Naruto left his cover and charged. He jumped over their cover and put a bullet into an alien's head before quickly whipping out his pistol and emptying his clip into a group of aliens. He loaded a fresh magazine into the pistol. He never noticed the detonator in the alien's hand or the very menacing bomb hiding under an alien's body. As the alien went to press the trigger, it was stopped by a katana to the head. Naruto looked behind to see Toshiro with his katana in an alien's brain. The blonde shinobi went over and took the detonator from its hands and analyzed it. He finished looking at the detonator and found the bomb lying under the body of a dead alien. Naruto looked the bomb and carefully disarming it before putting it in his equipment pouch for Konohamaru to take apart. He went toward the door to find it locked. "Blow it," ordered Naruto. The rebel nodded and took out a piece of C4. He placed the small block of plastic explosive on the door and pressed the detonator. The door was reduced to pieces as Naruto entered to find two doors. One led to the biological research laboratory and the other led to the weapons laboratory. He commanded half of his men to go through the research lab while he went through the weapons lab. He entered the room and immediately came under turret fire. He saw countless force fields had been put up to stop him. He brought up his rifle and fired at the aliens on the other side of the room, forcing them to take cover. As the last of his men entered the room, the aliens were already retreating into the experimentation labs. He followed after them and kept firing, killing any aliens that tried to stand in his way. He ordered some men to stay behind and keep guard. He continued to advance until he reached a three-way intersection. The left was blocked, right led up some stair, and forward led down a hallway. He split his men into 3 groups and sent each of the groups down one path. Naruto took the right path that led to the bridge. He came across a platform from which he had killed countless aliens when he had arrived. He kicked them all to make sure they were dead and moved on. He noticed a control panel on the wall and walked up to it. He activated the control panel and opened the door that led into the next room while also giving the turret system new targets before leaving the room. Moving down a flight of stairs and remembered to take the east door to reach the bridge. As the east door opened, the sounds of chaos filled his ears. Drones and aliens scrambled around the room as the turrets fired on them. Naruto had no problem killing them off and moving on to the experimentation lab. He opened the door to the experimentation lab and was met with eerie silence. The entire room was pitch black and giving Naruto and his men shivers. They turned on the lights from their rifles and quietly stalked into the room. Beams of light scanned the room for anything with life only to find nothing. Suddenly they heard something crash on the floor. Every rifle moved to the source of the noise to see some sort of figure in the corner of their eyes run away. "General, there's something wrong here," whispered the captain in concern. Naruto nodded in agreement. They continued stalking into the room until they reached the room that brought bad memories to all of them. In the room were the machines the aliens had used to torture and experiment on them. Naruto could practically feel the fear coming from his men. "Don't worry men, once we take control, I will let you personally burn this part of the ship to the ground, assured Naruto. His men nodded as they continued away from the machines and returned to the pitch-black darkness. Halt, whispered Naruto, causing his men to stop and survey their surroundings. Naruto looked through his Pip-Boy at the schematics of the ship. While he looked through the schematics, one of his men accidentally began to move. He felt something pop under his foot, and the eerie atmosphere was already making him paranoid, causing him to overreact and fall back. His actions began a domino effect as all the other soldiers heard him fall and frantically looked around with their fingers on the trigger. Finally, one of them saw what spooked him, a dead alien, with half its face bitten off. The soldier overreacted at the sight and shot at the dead alien, causing everyone to think they were under attack and start shooting as well. There was chaos as the panicking rebels shot off their rifles at non-existent enemies. Cease fire, shouted the blonde commander. His men seemed to have heard him as they stopped shooting and looked at his commander. Everyone, calm down. You're all overreacting. There is nothing here, spoke Naruto. The rebels let out some awkward laughs as they breathed deeply and calmed down. Is everyone calm? His men nodded. Good, now get ready. We still have a mission to complete. Naruto turned and was immediately face to face with one of the most terrifying creature he had ever seen. Its body stood at 8 feet and was all bone, and its eyes were black as coal. The creature seemed to just observe Naruto until it took a deep breath and let out a piercing scream. Naruto and his men held their ears as it screamed until Naruto put a bullet in its head, causing it to fall to the floor and bleed green blood. Suddenly the entire room was filled with more similar screams that seemed to be getting closer and closer. Everyone turned their rifles toward the noise to see hundreds of the abominations running at them with hunger in their eyes. Run! Yelled Naruto. His men did exactly that as they followed their commander to the exit. The creatures screamed as they ran on their 2 legs, clawing at the air in hopes of catching their prey. Gunfire sounded as the rebel opened fire on the abominations in hopes of thinning their numbers. Naruto himself emptied a clip into the horde, but it seemed for every one they killed, another would take its place. Naruto slowed his pace until he was in the back. Keep running, don't stop or else you'll die, warned Naruto. His men didn't need to be told twice as they followed their commander's orders and ran toward a steel door that had light shooting from the gaps, most likely an exit. Naruto reached into his equipment pouch and took out the alien bomb he had taken in the observation deck. Rearming the bomb, Naruto pulled his arm back and threw it into the horde before running full speed toward the exit. He knew that if these things got out, the rebels would be slaughtered. Close the door, ordered Naruto as he neared the exit. His men looked shocked and were about to argue, but the blonde shinobi interrupted them. I said close the door, that's an order. His men exchanged looks before following his orders and closing the door, as the mechanism began to shut the steel door. Naruto grabbed the alien detonator and pressed it. The explosion ran out and blue fire quickly filled the laboratory. The abominations continued to pursue Naruto, but the blast was faster and they were engulfed in the blast. Naruto looked back to see the blast inching closer and closer. He leapt toward the door and narrowly got out of the room before the steel door shut and contained the explosion. Naruto panted as he caught his breath, his men in similar states as him. He looked around to see he was in the biological research lab. The men he had sent to take the lab soon met up with them. Sit rep, ordered Naruto as he stood back up, wanting to know the resistance they met in the research lab. We were met with little resistance, General. The aliens pulled back the minute they saw us and left drones and turrets to fight us, reported the squad captain. Naruto nodded in understanding. He looked around and found what he was looking for, the teleporter to the bridge. Alright, there's the bridge. 4 men will come with me while the others stay here and secure the perimeter, ordered Naruto. His men nodded and his 4 most trained troops stood next to him on the teleporter. A 5th soldier went to the control panel and teleported them to the bridge. They were engulfed in light and appeared in the bridge of the ship. They charged into the room and held all of them at gunpoint. The pilots put their hands up in surrender while the captain looked at Naruto and his men in hate. What, nothing to say? Sneered Naruto. The alien captain seemed to reach for his sidearm, but a laser bolt to the chair forced him to stop. I suggest you don't do that. Unless you want to die, threatened Naruto. The captain clicked and babbled calmly, trying to communicate. His Pip-Boy picked up on his speech and began to translate using a software program Konohamaru had installed on his Pip-Boy. You may have won here, human. But our sister ship will destroy this ship before you can even try to use it. You have bitten off more than you can chew. Surrender now and I might give you a painless death, threatened the alien captain. Naruto smirked as he fired and put a laser beam into the captain's head, killing him and signaling his men to kill the other pilots. With all the aliens dead, they gathered up their bodies and threw them into a corner. Naruto sat at the captain's chair and looked at the earth in the distance. Take your positions, ordered Naruto. We still have to deal with that other ship, explained Naruto. His men obeyed and sat at the ship consoles. Their training with Konohamaru kicked in and they began pressing buttons and activating the thruster and the main alien weapons. Sir, 8 hostile incoming, warned his subordinate. Naruto saw 8 battleships headed toward them in diamond formation. Fire the thermo rockets, ordered Naruto. His gunner nodded and flipped open a switch. Platforms of missiles opened in the bottom of the ship and fired a barrage of projectiles. The battleships sent out flares and caused some of the rockets to explode prematurely, but the others still took out 4 of their ships. Activate the death ray and bring the shields up to maximum protection. His subordinate heard his orders and executed them. The ship's death ray lowered and aimed itself at the enemy ship, causing the other ship to do the same. Divert power to the death ray and fire. There was a loud rumbling as a blue ray of energy shot off toward the enemy ship and impacted on its side. Full power to the shields, ordered Naruto. Just as the enemy death ray impacted the Zeta, the shields held and the ship received minimal damage. Activate the anti-air guns, ordered Naruto. On the surface of the ship, turrets rose and rapidly fired blue beams of energy at the enemy battleships, bringing them down. The ship shook violently as another death ray impacted the ship, causing the ship to take heavy damage. Fire the death ray at full power. There was another beam of blue energy as it impacted the bridge of the enemy ship and destroyed it. Sir, the enemy bridge was destroyed. What are your orders? Naruto was in his thoughts as he went through plans in his head. Maneuver the ship to face their hangar, ordered the blonde general. His men nodded and the thrusters of the massive ship activated, moving the ship until the death ray was facing the enemy hangar. Fire at full power. The beam of energy was fired and ripped through the metal doors of the enemy ship, destroying the hangar bay and ripping a hole through the entire ship. Fire the death ray at their main weapon. There was another beam impacting the enemy death ray and leaving the enemy ship dead in space. With no bridge to control the ship, no hangar to send out ships, and no weapon to defend themselves, the ship was useless. Naruto looked at the destroyed ship in triumph. He needed the ship intact as to scavenge the alien weaponry from the wreckage. He could wait. He knew that the energy beam had ripped through the oxygen supply and the aliens would soon suffocate, giving him time to train his men on how to control the alien ships and sending a group to scavenge anything useful from the destroyed ship. His plans were coming to fruition. He had Elliot defrosting any remaining humans from cryostorage. He would have his elite troops train the new recruits and Konohamaru teach his students how to convert the assault rifles into their alien counterparts. The only thing left was to choose where to begin his new nation. Deploy a homing beacon to Earth, ordered Naruto as he continued to gaze at the planet. Where should I send it? Asked his subordinate. Washington, D.C., or should I say the capital wasteland? That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.